Déjà vu, glitches in the matrix. Have you ever been walking down a familiar street or maybe sitting in a cafe, and suddenly you feel strange? Not scared, not in danger, but almost like you've been there before. The faces, the sounds, the way the sunlight falls through the window, it all feels so familiar, but you know you've never experienced this exact moment in your life. That feeling has a name. We call it déjà vu, a French phrase meaning already seen. For most people, déjà vu is just a passing oddity. It lasts a few seconds, then fades, leaving only a faint question in your mind. Why did that feel so real? But for those who believe we might be living in a simulation, déjà vu is something more than a quirky brain trick. It could be a tiny glimpse of the system behind our reality, a brief glitch in the code. Imagine you're inside a vast computer program. Every sight, every sound, every sensation is generated by lines of code rendered in real time. Now imagine that for a fraction of a second, the system makes a mistake. A frame is repeated, a line of dialogue is played twice, a sequence you've already experienced is accidentally shown again. To you, it feels like a memory, like you've lived this moment before, but maybe you haven't. Maybe it's just the program recycling a scene. Of course, scientists have their own explanations. The most common theory is that déjà vu happens when your brain processes the same information twice, once unconsciously and then again consciously. It's like watching a movie trailer before you see the film. The second time around it feels familiar because part of your brain has already previewed it. But here's the strange thing, sometimes déjà vu is so vivid, so overwhelmingly real, that it feels impossible to explain away as a small brain hiccup. People have described déjà vu moments lasting for what feels like an eternity, where everything in the scene, voices, smells, movements, matches a perfect mental memory they can't place. And then there are the patterns. Some people report déjà vu happening more often during times of stress, after vivid dreams, or even when traveling to new places. Others say they've had déjà vu about events that later happen exactly as they remember, blurring the line between memory and prediction. If we are living in a simulation, déjà vu could be the result of something much bigger. It might be a small error in the system, like a skipped record in a song. Or perhaps it's not a glitch at all. Maybe it's intentional. Maybe it's the simulation's way of reminding us that our world isn't quite what it seems. Think about video games. Sometimes game designers place repeated scenes or familiar assets in the background to save processing power. A tree in one corner might be exactly the same as a tree in another corner, copied and pasted. If our reality is like that, maybe déjà vu is what happens when our mind notices the repetition. And there's another idea. Déjà vu could be the result of a checkpoint reload. Imagine the simulation is constantly saving our progress, like a game saving your position before a big choice. If something goes wrong or if the system needs to make a change, it might reload from the last checkpoint. For you, this would feel like living through the same moment twice, but with tiny differences you can't quite pinpoint. Some people find this idea unsettling, but others find it strangely comforting. If déjà vu is a glitch in the matrix, it means we've briefly caught the system showing its seams. We've seen a tiny crack in the wall of our world, a reminder that reality may be more flexible, more mysterious than we think. The next time you experience déjà vu, pause for a moment, look around, pay attention to every detail, the colors, the sounds, the people nearby. Ask yourself, have I been here before, or is this just the simulation showing me a repeat? It's a fleeting moment, yes, but perhaps it's also a gift. Whether it's a brain trick, a message from a deeper layer of reality, or just a cosmic joke, déjà vu invites us to question the world around us. It whispers that there's more going on than meets the eye. And in a universe where so much feels predictable, that tiny spark of mystery might be the most valuable thing we have. So maybe the next time you get that strange, dizzying rush of familiarity, you can smile instead of frown. Because if it is a glitch in the matrix, it means you've caught reality off guard, and not many people can say they've done that. Unexplainable coincidences that feel scripted. We've all had moments in life where the timing feels too perfect. Maybe you're thinking about an old friend you haven't spoken to in years, and suddenly they send you a message out of the blue. Or perhaps you overhear a random phrase in a cafe, and later that same day, you read the exact words in a book. Little things lining up in a way that feels almost written, as if someone, somewhere, is carefully arranging the pieces of your day. Coincidences are part of life. Statistically, in a world filled with billions of people and countless daily events, unlikely overlaps are bound to happen. That's what scientists will tell you. But for those who believe we might be living inside a simulation, coincidences that feel scripted could be something else entirely. Think about movies or TV shows. Every line of dialogue, every camera angle, every background detail is chosen for a reason. Nothing is truly random. It all serves the story. If we are in a simulated world, maybe the script works the same way. The events in your life might be guided, nudged, or even deliberately placed, so they lead you towards certain moments, people, or choices. Some coincidences are so astonishing, they're almost impossible to dismiss. Take the story of Anthony Hopkins. Before filming a movie based on a novel, he searched everywhere for a copy of the book, but couldn't find one. Then, while sitting on a bench in a train station, he found a forgotten copy lying next to him. Later, he discovered that this exact copy had been lent by the author to a friend, who lost it in that very train station. Coincidence? Or the universe? Perhaps the simulation? Making sure the story unfolded exactly as planned? There are also those strange repeating patterns in life. You might notice a certain number appearing again and again on license plates, receipts, even the time on your phone. Or maybe you keep bumping into the same stranger in different places without any clear reason. At first, you might laugh it off, but after the 5th or 6th time, it can start to feel intentional. Simulation theorists suggest that coincidences might be like story triggers in a video game, little events placed to push your character in a certain direction. Maybe meeting that person isn't random. Maybe finding that book, hearing that song, or standing under that streetlight at just the right time is part of a hidden path written into the code of your reality. Even psychologists admit that coincidences can feel deeply meaningful. There's a word for it: synchronicity. The famous psychologist Carl Jung used it to describe events that are connected, not by cause and effect, but by meaning. In a simulated reality, meaning could be the code, and synchronicities might be the way the program communicates with us. And then there's the emotional side of it. Coincidences don't just happen. They often seem to happen when we need them most. A song playing at the exact moment you feel hopeless. A stranger offering help right when you're lost. A message arriving seconds after you are thinking about someone. It's as if reality is paying attention. If this is a simulation, then maybe the coincidences we experience are like signals from the system letting us know we're on the right path. In a way, they're small winks from the hidden code, reassuring us that our story is still unfolding exactly as intended. But here's the interesting thing. Whether or not we're in a simulation, these moments still affect us the same way. They make us pause. They make us wonder. They make us feel connected to something larger, something that seems to care about where we're headed. So the next time life serves you one of those perfect, unbelievable coincidences, take a moment to notice how it feels. Not just the surprise, but the strange sense of belonging it brings. Maybe it's a random alignment of events, or maybe it's the system dropping a perfectly timed clue into your personal storyline. Because if reality really is scripted, then every coincidence is like a page turning in a book you didn't know you were reading. And somewhere, far beyond what you can see, the author is smiling because you've just arrived at the exact place you were meant to be. Reality's pixelation at the edge of perception. Close your eyes for a moment and imagine walking through a video game world. Everything near you is detailed, trees swaying in the wind, shadows moving across the ground, the texture of bricks in the walls. But far in the distance or in the corners of your vision, things are less clear. Sometimes they're blurry, sometimes oddly flat, and sometimes they seem to form into little blocks, like pixels on a screen. Now open your eyes and think about our own world. Most of the time reality feels sharp and crisp, but every now and then we notice strange imperfections, moments when the edges of our perception feel artificial. It could be a far-off mountain that seems oddly flat until you get closer, or the way a certain object becomes clear only after you focus on it, almost like the world is loading the details in real time. For most people, this is simply how human vision works. Our eyes naturally focus on what's important, and our brains fill in the rest. But for those who believe we might be living in a simulation, these little quirks could be something else entirely. tiny signs that our world is being rendered on demand, just like in a video game. If we think about the technology we already have, virtual reality, high-end graphics, immersive simulations, it's easy to imagine how a more advanced system might work. To save processing power, a simulated world wouldn't need to render everything at once. It would only create the details for whatever the player you are looking at. Everything else could exist in a lower resolution until it's needed. And maybe, sometimes, we catch the system in the act. That odd shimmer you see in the distance, the way stars seem to jump when you look directly at them, the strange blocky patterns in clouds when viewed from an airplane window. In a simulated reality, these could be tiny glitches in the rendering process, places where the pixels of the universe momentarily show themselves. There are even moments in life where people claim to have seen this pixelation up close. They describe reality breaking down into geometric patterns, shimmering grids, or static-like fuzz. Sometimes this happens during extreme exhaustion, illness, or altered states of consciousness. Sometimes it happens in perfectly normal circumstances, walking down the street, staring at the horizon, or looking out at the ocean. Scientists have explanations for these experiences, of course. Our vision is built from light-hitting cells in our eyes, and our brains do a lot of work to interpret those signals. Sometimes the process creates optical illusions, but still, the idea that our entire world might be a vast, beautifully rendered simulation makes those little visual oddities feel suspicious. If you think about it, we've already seen similar effects in technology. In early computer games, distant scenery was often just a flat image. In modern games, objects far away are low resolution until you approach, at which point the textures load in. Could our reality work the same way? Could the universe itself be using some sort of cosmic level of detail system to manage resources? And here's where it gets interesting. Some simulation theorists believe that pixelation isn't limited to our vision. They suggest that at the smallest level of reality, the universe might actually be pixelated. In physics, there's a concept called the Planck length, the smallest possible unit of space. If space is truly made of tiny, indivisible chunks, then our world is already built from pixels, just at a scale far too small for us to see. So perhaps what we call pixelation at the edge of perception is simply a rare moment when the deepest structure of reality peeks through. A brief reminder that beneath the flowing rivers, rustling leaves, and glowing stars, the universe might be running on some kind of hidden grid. The next time you notice something strange in your vision, a shimmer, a blur, a blocky outline, take a moment to really look at it. Don't just blink it away. Maybe you've just caught the simulation adjusting itself, quietly fine-tuning the world so it matches what you expect to see. Because if reality truly is rendered in real time, then every time you turn your head, the system is working to create a world for you to step into. And just maybe, every once in a while, you'll be quick enough to spot the pixels before they fade back into the seamless illusion. Quantum particles behaving strangely when observed. If you've ever heard someone talk about quantum physics, you know it's the part of science that sounds the most like magic. At the smallest scales, the level of atoms and subatomic particles, the universe stops following the neat, predictable rules we're used to. Instead, it starts acting weird. Really weird. One of the strangest things scientists have discovered is that the simple act of observing something can change the way it behaves. Not touching it, not influencing it in any physical way, just watching it. This is best illustrated in what's called the double-slit experiment, one of the most famous tests in all of physics. In this experiment, scientists fire tiny particles, like electrons or photons, at a barrier with two narrow slits. On the other side of the barrier is a screen that records where the particles land. Now, if you imagine tossing pebbles through two holes in a wall, you'd expect two clusters of impacts on the screen. But when these tiny particles pass through the slits, something strange happens. Instead of two neat lines, they create an interference pattern, like ripples from two stones dropped into a pond. This means that the particles are acting like waves, somehow passing through both slits at the same time and interfering with themselves. That's bizarre enough on its own, but it gets even stranger when scientists place a measuring device to observe which slit each particle actually goes through. When they watch, the interference pattern disappears. The particles stop behaving like waves and start behaving like solid objects again, going through one slit or the other, not both. It's as if the particles somehow know they're being observed and instantly change their behavior. In a purely physical, non-simulated world, this is deeply puzzling. But in a simulated reality, it almost makes sense. In a video game, for example, the game's engine only calculates certain details when they're relevant to the player. If no one is looking at a particular part of the world, it might not even exist in full detail. It's just potential until it's needed. Maybe quantum particles work the same way. When they're not being watched, they exist in a blurry, wave-like state of possibilities. The moment we look, the system renders them into a single outcome, just like a simulation revealing an object only when you turn your head toward it. Some scientists have even said it feels as if consciousness itself plays a role. That our act of measurement isn't just passively recording reality, it's actively creating it. If that's true, it's almost as if we are participants in running the simulation, our awareness triggering the code to generate the details. And it's not just the double-slit experiment. Across quantum physics, there are countless examples of particles behaving in ways that suggest the universe isn't fully set until it's observed. There's a quantum entanglement, where two particles can be connected so deeply that changing one instantly changes the other, no matter how far apart they are. There's superposition, where particles exist in multiple states at once until they're measured. All of this points toward a reality that isn't fixed and solid, but dynamic and responsive. In the simulation theory view, this responsiveness might be a resource-saving feature. Why spend energy rendering every tiny detail of the universe if most of it will never be noticed? Just like in a game, only what's in the player's field of focus needs to be fully realized. Everything else can remain as background potential. Of course, physicists have their own theories that don't involve simulations. Quantum mechanics is simply how the universe works, they say. It doesn't need a programmer to explain it. But even many scientists admit that the results feel unsettling, as if reality has a hidden layer of rules we've only just begun to glimpse. The next time you hear about quantum particles changing when observed, think about what that really means. It suggests that reality is not entirely separate from you, that your awareness, your focus, might be an active part of shaping the world you experience. And if this really is a simulation, then every time you look closely at something, every time you measure, every time you notice, you might just be helping the system decide what form reality should take next. In that case, observing isn't just passive, it's a kind of creative act, a way of writing the code, one conscious glance at a time. Patterns in nature that feel programmed. Step outside into nature and you'll quickly notice something. Patterns are everywhere, from the swirl of a seashell to the branching of trees, from the way rivers curve to the shape of a galaxy. There's a sense of order woven into the chaos. It's beautiful, but it can also feel suspiciously perfect. One of the most famous examples is the Fibonacci sequence, a series of numbers where each number is the sum of the two before it. 0, 1, 1, 2, 3, 5, 8, and so on. This sequence appears in the spirals of sunflower seeds, the arrangement of pine cones, the pattern of hurricanes, and even in the structure of DNA. Why should nature follow a mathematical formula so often? In a purely natural world, the answer might be that these patterns simply work, they're efficient, they conserve energy, and evolution favors them. But in the simulation theory perspective, these repeating structures could be a sign of something else, a design template built into the code of our reality. Just as programmers reuse assets in video games, trees that have the same shape, rocks that appear in multiple places, perhaps our universe reuses certain mathematical blueprints to build everything we see. Look closely at a snowflake under a microscope, and you'll see symmetry so precise it could have been drawn by a machine. Examine the veins of a leaf, and they resemble the branching of rivers, lightning bolts, and even the neural pathways in your brain. Different materials, different scales, yet the same structures appear again and again. It's as if the same code keeps being copied and pasted across the simulation. The repetition doesn't stop with shapes. Nature seems to rely on a set of underlying rules that work no matter where you look. Fractals are a perfect example, shapes that repeat themselves infinitely, with each smaller part looking like the whole. Mountains, coastlines, clouds, and even broccoli follow fractal patterns. The mathematics behind them is simple, but the results are complex and stunning. Now think about how computer graphics work. In video games and simulations, fractals are often used to create realistic landscapes, clouds, and terrain. They're efficient because they allow infinite detail to be generated from a small set of instructions. Could it be that the same principle applies to our universe? That instead of building every rock and leaf from scratch, the program simply runs the same mathematical script over and over, tweaking the variables each time. Another strange thing is how often nature's patterns are tied to numbers, especially certain golden ratios that seem to appear far too often to be coincidence. The spiral of a galaxy, the curl of a wave, even the proportions of your own body often match these ratios. It's as if the universe prefers certain shapes, the way a designer might prefer certain fonts or colours. And it's not just static patterns. Think about animal behaviour. Schools of fish and flocks of birds move in perfect harmony, turning and shifting as if guided by a hidden algorithm. Ant colonies build complex tunnel systems without a blueprint. Bees construct hexagonal honeycombs, the most efficient shape for storage, without needing to measure. Are these behaviours purely instinct, or are they built-in subroutines in the simulation's code? Simulation theorists would say that these patterns are default settings, efficient, reliable designs that have been reused across the simulated world for billions of years. In programming, it's common to create a set of base templates and then build everything else from them. If our reality is coded, then perhaps nature is simply running its base templates, from the smallest cell to the largest galaxy. Even in chaos, the patterns persist. Randomness in nature is often not truly random. It's what scientists call deterministic chaos, where the overall shape follows a set of rules even if individual events seem unpredictable. A dripping faucet, a wildfire, or a heartbeat might seem irregular, but when you analyze the data, the same mathematical relationships appear. So what does this mean for us? It could be that our reality is built on a foundation of reusable designs, that every tree, every cloud, every spiral galaxy is part of a grand pattern, written into the code of the universe itself. Next time you're outside, take a moment to notice these patterns. Watch how leaves grow in a spiral up a stem. Notice the branching in rivers or lightning. See the symmetry in a flower. These aren't just coincidences, they could be signatures of the system, hidden in plain sight. Because if we are living in a simulation, these patterns aren't just beautiful, they're proof of the code that keeps the world running. And maybe, just maybe, noticing them is like peeking into the source code of reality itself. Dreams that predict the future. We've all had dreams that stick with us long after we wake up. Some are strange and surreal, others are so real they could almost be memories. But every now and then there's a dream that feels different, a dream that later seems to play out in real life, down to the smallest details. Maybe you dream about meeting someone you've never seen before, and a week later you bump into them in the exact setting from your dream, or you dream about a conversation, and later you hear those exact words spoken. When it happens, it can leave you feeling unsettled, like reality has been playing by a script you somehow glimpsed ahead of time. In a purely natural explanation, scientists might say it's coincidence. Our brains process enormous amounts of information every day, tiny details we're not even aware of, and sometimes they connect these pieces into dreams that happen to line up with future events. That's one possibility, but if we consider the idea that we might be living in a simulation, dreams that predict the future could mean something else entirely. Think about how video games work. In some games, future events are already coded into the system, waiting for you to trigger them. You might get hints, foreshadowing, or even brief previews before those events happen. If our reality is a kind of simulation, dreams might serve a similar purpose, brief windows into moments that haven't loaded yet, but already exist somewhere in the system's code. Some people who've experienced predictive dreams describe them as unusually vivid, more detailed than ordinary dreams. They remember exact colors, smells, or emotions. And when the real-life moment arrives, it feels like stepping into a scene they've already rehearsed. This phenomenon, sometimes called precognitive dreaming, has been reported for centuries. There are famous historical examples too. Abraham Lincoln is said to have dreamt about his own assassination days before it happened. Many survivors of tragedies have claimed to dream about the events beforehand, sometimes in unsettling detail. If these dreams were purely random, we'd expect them to be vague and inconsistent. But often they are precise, From a simulation theory perspective, this could be a simple matter of accessing stored data ahead of time. If the system already knows what's going to happen because it's already been written into the program, then perhaps our minds sometimes tap into that information while we sleep. Dreams are, after all, a time when our conscious mind steps aside. The barriers of logic and linear thinking fade, and our brain starts to wander freely through memories, feelings, and possibly unrendered parts of the simulation. In this free-flowing state, maybe it's easiest to connect with the deeper code of reality. It's worth noting that in many predictive dreams, the dreamer can't change the outcome. They might see the event coming, but when it arrives, it unfolds exactly as they dreamed. This is interesting because it matches the idea of a pre-written simulation script. If the event is already coded, then seeing it early wouldn't necessarily give you the power to alter it. You're just getting a glimpse of the next scene in the story. Of course, there's another possibility, one that's even stranger. What if the dream itself is the trigger? In a simulation, events could be conditional. That is, the system might only generate certain outcomes if specific variables are met. A dream could be one of those variables, a way to prepare you mentally, or even to make sure you're in the right place at the right time. For example, imagine dreaming about meeting someone in a cafe. The dream sticks in your mind, so the next week, you decide to visit that cafe. And there they are, exactly as you saw them. Was the dream predicting the meeting, or was it causing it by guiding your actions? In a simulated reality, the difference might not matter. They are both part of the same pre-designed chain of events. The next time you have a vivid dream, especially one that feels unusually real, it might be worth paying attention. Write it down. Notice the details. You might be surprised to find them unfolding later in your waking life. Because if we are living in a simulation, then perhaps our dreams aren't just random brain activity. They might be sneak previews of what's to come, a way for the system to whisper future scenes into our minds before they arrive. And when those scenes play out exactly as we saw them, we're left with the unmistakable feeling that somehow we've been here before. Unsolved scientific paradoxes. Science is built on questions, and for the most part, those questions eventually find answers. We make observations, run experiments, gather data, and form explanations. But some questions refuse to be solved. They linger decade after decade, defying every attempt to make sense of them. These are the unsolved scientific paradoxes, mysteries that sit at the very edge of human understanding. On the surface, paradoxes are just problems without solutions. But if we consider the idea that our reality might be a simulation, these stubborn mysteries start to look different. They could be signs of limits in the code, glitches in the system, or rules that aren't meant to be fully understood. Take the Fermi paradox. By all calculations, the universe should be teeming with intelligent life. There are billions of galaxies, each with billions of stars, many of which have planets in the right zone for life. The math makes it almost certain that we shouldn't be alone, and yet we've found nothing. No signals, no visits, no undeniable signs of alien civilizations. If our reality is a simulation, maybe the reason is simple. The world beyond Earth hasn't been fully programmed with neighbors. In a game, areas outside the main storyline often remain empty until needed. Then there's the black hole information paradox. In theory, anything that falls into a black hole is lost forever. But quantum mechanics tells us that information can't just disappear, it must be preserved somehow. These two ideas completely contradict each other, yet both are supported by strong evidence. From a simulation perspective, maybe this is a case where two different parts of the physics engine aren't perfectly aligned, and the result is a rule-breaking overlap we can't resolve. Another example is wave-particle duality, the strange behavior of quantum particles acting like both waves and particles depending on how we measure them. This is the kind of paradox that makes scientists shake their heads because it shouldn't be possible in a purely physical reality, but in a simulated one, it might be no more surprising than a shape in a video game behaving differently depending on the camera angle. The form of reality could simply depend on how it's being accessed. Paradoxes also appear in the realm of time. The twin paradox, for instance, comes from Einstein's theory of relativity. If one twin travels through space at near light speed and returns, they will have aged less than the twin who stayed on Earth. Time, in other words, doesn't tick at the same rate for everyone. This is proven science. Yet it feels like something you'd expect from a simulation. a system where time is just another adjustable setting. Then there's dark matter and dark energy, two things we've never directly seen, yet which appear to make up about 95% of the universe. We only know they exist because of their effects on the matter we can see. It's almost as if huge portions of the game world are running on invisible scaffolding hidden from the player's view. Simulation theorists suggest that these paradoxes might be deliberate. Just as game designers sometimes create mysteries that players can never fully solve, perhaps the system running our reality includes certain puzzles, not to frustrate us, but to keep us exploring, questioning, and pushing the limits of our understanding. In that sense, paradoxes could be the simulation's way of making sure we never run out of curiosity. Of course, there's also the possibility that these paradoxes are safeguards. In some video games, players are prevented from going beyond certain boundaries by invisible walls or loops. Maybe scientific paradoxes are the intellectual equivalent, boundaries we can't cross because they would reveal too much about the true nature of the simulation. What's fascinating is that these paradoxes often come with clues, small pieces of truth hidden in the contradictions. Scientists chip away at them, discovering new rules and patterns along the way, but the core mystery remains untouched, almost as if the deeper truth lies in a layer of reality we can't quite access. So the next time you hear about a scientific paradox that breaks our understanding of the universe, consider the possibility that it's not broken at all. It might be working exactly as intended, according to rules set far beyond our comprehension. And maybe, just maybe, these unsolved mysteries are not signs that the universe is imperfect, but proof that it's far more complex than we can imagine. Whether that complexity comes from nature itself, or from the careful design of a cosmic programmer, the effect is the same. We are left in awe, gazing at the edges of our reality, knowing there's something beyond them that we can't yet reach. People who seem to reset in your life. Have you ever met someone who changes in ways that feel almost like they've been reprogrammed? Maybe you've known a friend for years, and then one day they just don't seem like the same person. Their mannerisms, their interests, even their memories of events you both experienced, suddenly they're different. Almost as if a part of their personality has been erased and rewritten. In the context of simulation theory, some believe this could be a sign of a reset. Just like in a video game when a non-player character or NPC glitches, freezes, or gets updated, certain people in our lives might undergo unexplained changes because the system has reloaded their character file. Think about it. Sometimes a person disappears from your life entirely, and then months or years later, they return, acting as though nothing happened. They might have no recollection of what they were like before, or perhaps you notice someone acting completely differently from one day to the next. A long-time co-worker suddenly stops remembering the inside jokes you've shared. A childhood friend develops new habits overnight, without explanation. It feels strange, almost like they've respawned in a slightly altered version of reality. Simulation enthusiasts suggest that if our universe is a coded environment, it could be designed to conserve resources. In that scenario, the characters in your personal world might not be running their full complex personality at all times. When you're not interacting with them, they might be on pause or operating in a simplified background mode. Then when you meet again, the system reloads them, sometimes with changes like a software update. This might explain why some relationships feel as though they've been reset to an earlier stage. You might have gone through emotional highs and lows with someone, had meaningful conversations, shared experiences, yet they seem to have forgotten or ignored all of it. It can be disorienting. Some people experience this reset in more dramatic ways. Imagine you're having a conversation with someone, and they suddenly look confused, like their mind just blanked for a moment. They pause, restart their sentence, and continue talking as if nothing happened. You brush it off, but in the back of your mind, you feel as though you just saw a little glitch. Another curious phenomenon is the way certain people reappear in your life unexpectedly, as though the simulation decided to bring them back into your storyline. Maybe you bump into an old classmate halfway across the world, or perhaps you keep running into the same stranger in different places over the years. These recurring encounters feel oddly scripted, like a side quest that keeps looping back into your main narrative. Psychologists, of course, have other explanations. They might say it's simply the mind's way of noticing patterns, or that people change because of life circumstances, not because of a cosmic reset. And that's certainly true. People grow, adapt, and evolve. But simulation theory asks, what if those changes sometimes aren't natural? What if they're evidence that the code running this reality is shifting and the versions of people you know are being updated without your awareness? There's also an unsettling emotional side to this. When someone you care about changes suddenly, it can feel like you've lost them, even though they're still physically there. It's as though the person you knew has been replaced with a near-identical copy who shares their face but not their soul. This idea is both fascinating and eerie, because it blurs the boundary between the human and the artificial. Some even believe these resets could be triggered by your own storyline. If the simulation is designed to tailor itself to your personal journey, it might re-script the people around you to guide your decisions or push you towards certain experiences. In that sense, every person you meet could be part of a larger interactive narrative, one in which their role can change depending on where you are in your life. If you start paying attention, you might notice these resets more often. Watch for shifts in people's personalities that happen too quickly to make sense. Listen for inconsistencies in their memories. Pay attention to those uncanny moments when someone's presence in your life changes without explanation. Are these just natural quirks of human behavior? Or are they the telltale signs of a simulated reality updating itself in real time? Whether you see it as a technological glitch or simply a human mystery, one thing is certain. These resets challenge the way we think about identity, memory, and connection. If the people in our lives can change so suddenly, what does that mean about the stability of reality itself? Maybe, just maybe, we're all running on a program, our roles shifting, our personalities updating, our memories altering, all according to a script we can't see, and if that's true, then every encounter you have is part of something much bigger than you can imagine. The universe's mathematical precision. When you look at the world around you, it's easy to be amazed by its beauty. The curve of a seashell, the spiral of a galaxy, the perfect balance of a snowflake. But if you take a step back and look closer, there's something even more astonishing. Beneath all that beauty lies a language older than words, a language written not in letters, but in numbers. It's the language of mathematics, and it seems to be built into the very structure of reality. Think about this. No matter where we look, from the smallest subatomic particle to the largest supercluster of galaxies, everything follows mathematical laws. Planets orbit the sun according to precise equations. Light bends at exact angles. The force of gravity works the same way everywhere, following a formula so elegant it can be written on a single line. The question is, why? If reality were truly random, we might expect chaos, unpredictability, and no underlying order. But that's not what we see. Instead, we find patterns so perfect that they almost feel designed. Take the golden ratio, for example. This is a number that appears in nature again and again, in sunflower seeds, in hurricanes, in the spiral arms of galaxies. The same mathematical ratio shapes seashells, pine cones, and even the structure of DNA. Artists and architects have used it for centuries because it feels naturally pleasing to the human eye. But why would such a number be so deeply woven into both nature and human creativity? Then there's pi, that mysterious number that begins 3.4159 and goes on forever without repeating. It describes the relationship between a circle's circumference and its diameter, and it shows up in places you'd never expect, in the physics of waves, in the behavior of pendulums, even in the way light moves. The more scientists explore the universe, the more they find that math isn't just a tool we invented to measure things. It's the foundation upon which reality is built. It's as if the universe itself runs on a kind of cosmic code. This brings us to a strange thought. If the universe is based on a set of precise mathematical rules, doesn't that sound a lot like programming? In a computer simulation, every single action, from the way a leaf falls to the way a planet moves, is determined by code. The laws of physics in that digital world are written by a programmer. In our world, the laws of physics are written in mathematics. This connection has led some scientists and philosophers to wonder if the precision of our universe is evidence that we're inside some kind of grand simulation. If there's a programmer behind our reality, then the perfect math we see could simply be the coding language they use to create everything. Consider gravity. It could have been any strength at all, too strong and the universe would have collapsed in on itself. Too weak and galaxies, stars and planets could never have formed. Yet somehow it's tuned perfectly to an absurdly precise degree to allow life to exist. The same is true for the speed of light, the strength of electromagnetism, and the mass of subatomic particles. Each of these constants is set at just the right value. Change them even slightly, and the universe as we know it would be impossible. This perfect fine-tuning is one of the most puzzling mysteries in science. Some call it coincidence, others call it design, and for those who lean toward the simulation theory, it's exactly what they'd expect to find, a reality built with exact settings to achieve a desired outcome. Even time itself obeys mathematical laws. The Earth spins at a predictable rate. The Moon orbits with dependable precision. Atomic clocks, which use the vibrations of atoms to measure time, are so accurate they would lose only a second in millions of years. And yet, while the universe's math is incredibly precise, there's still room for mystery. Quantum physics shows us that, at the smallest scale, particles behave in ways that seem random and zigzag, until we step back and notice that even that randomness falls within precise mathematical probabilities. It's almost like the universe is both free and bound at the same time, free to display beauty, chaos, and creativity, but always staying within the limits of its perfect mathematical framework. So as you close your eyes and drift towards sleep, imagine the universe as an elegant equation, infinite and yet exact, beautiful and yet precise. Whether it's the work of nature, a divine creator, or an advanced programmer running a simulation, one thing is certain: our reality is built on numbers, and those numbers tell a story of balance, harmony, and an order so perfect it feels almost otherworldly. Mandela effect, false memories we share. Have you ever been completely certain about a memory, only to find out it never happened the way you remember? It's not just you. Millions of people have shared the exact same experience. This strange phenomenon is called the Mandela effect, and for some it's a clue that reality itself might not be as solid as we think. The name comes from a curious event in the late 2000s. Many people, especially online, claimed they clearly remembered Nelson Mandela dying in prison in the 80s. They could picture the funeral, the news coverage, and the public reaction. But here's the problem. Nelson Mandela was actually released from prison in 1990 and went on to become South Africa's president, living until 2013. This wasn't just one person's faulty memory. It was thousands of people recalling the same event that never happened. That's when people began using the term Mandela effect to describe shared false memories. The effect doesn't stop with Mandela. You might have heard some of the famous examples. For instance, many remember the children's book series being called the Berenstain Bears with an E, but in reality it's always been the Berenstain Bears with an A. Or think about the Monopoly Man. Do you picture him with a monocle? In reality, he never had one. Some chalk this up to the quirks of human memory. Memory, after all, isn't like a perfect recording. It's more like a puzzle your brain constantly rebuilds, sometimes using the wrong pieces. When enough people share similar life experiences or cultural references, they can accidentally rebuild the same wrong version of an event. Psychologists call this confabulation, where the mind fills in missing details with something that feels right. But for those who lean toward the simulation theory, the Mandela effect raises a bigger question. What if these false memories aren't just mistakes? What if they're glitches in the code of reality? Imagine a computer program running an enormous simulation, one with billions of interacting characters and countless events. If that simulation is updated or altered, tiny changes might ripple through. Most adjustments might go unnoticed, but sometimes something slips through the cracks. Perhaps the original version of the simulation had the Berenstain Bears and a monocle-wearing Monopoly Man. Then, after an update, those details shifted, leaving behind a lingering sense of the old reality in some people's minds. This idea connects to the concept of parallel timelines. If we're moving between slightly different versions of reality without realizing it, the Mandela effect could be the faint memory of our last stop. It's as if your brain kept a backup file from a different version of the universe, and every now and then, that file tries to merge with your current experience. The effect also challenges our trust in objective reality. We like to think there's one truth, one history, and one set of facts. But if thousands of people can remember the same event that never occurred, how solid is that truth? Could history be more flexible than we imagine? Skeptics argue that the Mandela effect is simply collective misremembering, amplified by the internet. Once someone suggests an alternate version of reality, others can be influenced to adopt it, especially if it aligns with a half-forgotten memory. In this view, it's not a glitch in the matrix, it's just how suggestion and memory work together to create false confidence. Still, the Mandela effect remains unsettling because it's so personal. We're not talking about complex science or abstract theory, we're talking about memories, those intimate snapshots of our lives that we rely on to tell us who we are. When those snapshots turn out to be wrong, it's like discovering a crack in your own foundation. So what does this mean for the simulation theory? If we are living in a simulated world, then our memories could be stored much like files in a computer, subject to edits, corruption, or even total rewrites. The Mandela effect might be the moment when the edit is sloppy and the old data peeks through. Whether you see it as a psychological quirk or evidence of a deeper truth, the Mandela effect invites us to question everything we think we know. Maybe our memories aren't perfect, maybe reality isn't either. And maybe, just maybe, that's because the world we live in is far more like a program than we dare to admit. In the end, the Mandela effect is both strange and strangely comforting. It shows that our reality might not be as fixed as we believe, and that in itself can be a hint of something much larger at play. Because if the details of the past can shift, who's to say the future isn't just as malleable? Time slowing down or speeding up. Have you ever noticed how some moments in life seem to stretch forever, while others pass in the blink of an eye? You might be sitting in a boring meeting at work, staring at the clock, and every second feels like an eternity. But then you spend a fun weekend with friends, and suddenly it's Sunday night, and you're wondering where the time went. This strange phenomenon, time feeling like it slows down or speeds up, might just be another sign that we're living in a simulation. Think about it. In a perfectly physical universe, time should move at a constant rate. 1 second should always be 1 second, no matter how you feel. But in our experience, time is anything but steady. It bends, stretches, and compresses depending on what's happening around us and inside our minds. If reality were a simulation, maybe this isn't just a trick of the brain. It could be the result of how the program manages resources. Imagine a video game. When something exciting or action-packed happens, the game's processing power focuses on the details, and sometimes the frame rate slows down to capture the moment. In our world, those slow-motion moments, like a near accident or an intense emotional experience, could be the simulation's way of giving your consciousness more frames per second to process everything. It's like the program is saying, hey, this is important. Let's slow things down so you remember every detail. On the other hand, when you're doing something repetitive or boring, maybe the simulation doesn't waste processing power on all the little details. It skips ahead, and before you know it, hours have passed with you barely noticing. That would explain why scrolling through social media or binge-watching a show can make entire evenings vanish without a trace. There's also the fact that as we get older, time seems to move faster. This could be explained by psychology. Each year becomes a smaller percentage of your life, but it could also be a programmed effect. Maybe the simulation speeds up the clock on purpose as we age, giving us the feeling of life rushing by. It could be part of the story arc built into the game of life. Strangely, extreme situations often trigger the slow motion effect. Athletes describe moments during games when everything around them seems to move slower, giving them more time to react. People in car accidents often recall every detail of the seconds leading up to the crash, as if time had stretched. If the simulation is designed to help us survive or perform better, slowing down time in these moments would be a logical feature. And then there are the moments when time speeds up without warning. You might be deep in a creative project or a conversation, and suddenly, hours have disappeared. Scientists call this flow state. But what if it's more than that? What if the simulation detects that you're deeply engaged and simply skips unnecessary moments to keep you immersed? This idea becomes even more curious when we think about how time perception can be influenced by external factors. Certain sounds, lights, or even smells can make time feel different. If reality is a program, these could be commands or variables that tweak your perception. There's also the mystery of dreams. Sometimes a dream feels like it lasts for hours, even though it happens during a brief moment of REM sleep. How can your brain fit so much experience into so little real time? In a simulation, this would be easy. Time inside the dream could be running at a completely different speed from time in the base reality. Of course, there are scientific explanations for these effects. Our brains process events differently depending on our level of attention, emotion, and focus. But even if that's true, it doesn't rule out the simulation theory. In fact, if our reality is programmed, our brains could simply be the user interface designed to interpret time in whatever way the system needs. One last thought. In some cultures and philosophies, time isn't seen as a strict, unchanging flow. It's viewed as flexible, subjective, and even illusory. If those ancient ideas are right, maybe humans have always sensed that time is not as rigid as we think. And if time can bend and stretch for us so easily, maybe it's because it's not a fundamental property of the universe. It's just part of the simulation's code, so the next time you feel like the day is dragging on forever, or that a week has flown by in a flash, consider this. It might not be your imagination. It might be a subtle reminder that the clock we live by isn't a law of nature. It's a feature of the game we're in, and like any good simulation, it can be tweaked whenever the system decides it's necessary. Artificial limits on human abilities. Have you ever wondered if human potential is being held back by something unseen, like we're running in a video game where the developer has set certain restrictions? The idea that there could be artificial limits on human abilities is one of the more intriguing signs that we might be living in a simulation. It's not about just hitting the gym harder or reading more books. It's about those invisible barriers that seem to exist no matter how much effort you put in, as if an unseen system is making sure you never reach your true maximum. Let's start with the physical side of things. The human body is impressive, but it also has curious limitations. We can't run at lightning speed, jump several meters high, or go without food for weeks without suffering. Sure, these limits seem natural, but think about it. If evolution is all about survival, why wouldn't we evolve to be stronger, faster, or more resilient? In a simulation framework, these could be intentional caps coded into our character design, like how game developers balance stats to keep players within certain boundaries. After all, if everyone had superhuman speed and strength, it would break the system's balance. The same goes for mental abilities. Our brains are powerful, yet frustratingly restricted. We forget things, we get tired, and our focus fades. Even the smartest humans can't instantly learn an entire language just by glancing at it, nor can we recall every detail from our past with perfect accuracy. Why not? In a simulated environment, this could be due to memory and processing limits, much like a computer game that only loads what it needs to render the scene in front of you, keeping other details blurry or inaccessible to save resources. There's also the fascinating speed limit of the human nervous system. Nerve impulses travel at about 100 meters per second, not even close to the speed of light. You might think, well, that's biology. But if this is a simulation, that cap might be a way to keep human reactions within a certain predictable range. It would prevent anyone from having truly instantaneous reflexes that could disrupt the flow of reality. Then there's the question of perception. Our eyes can only see a narrow slice of the electromagnetic spectrum, and our ears can only detect certain frequencies. Outside those ranges, it's like the data isn't even being rendered for us. A simulation might limit our sensory input to save processing power, or prevent us from detecting aspects of reality we're not supposed to interact with. Think of it as the visual draw distance in a video game. Beyond a certain point, the detail just doesn't exist until you get closer. One of the more mind-bending aspects of this theory is the idea of skill ceilings. Have you ever noticed how, no matter how much someone practices a skill, there's a point where improvement becomes microscopic or even impossible? Athletes hit performance plateaus, musicians stop making progress, and even chess grandmasters have limited to their strategies. In a simulation, these ceilings could be hard-coded parameters, preventing anyone from becoming too good at something, which could break the competitive balance or push the system beyond its intended boundaries. Even aging could be part of this artificial limitation. Why must the human body inevitably break down over time? Why can't our cells just keep repairing themselves forever? From a purely logical standpoint, it's inefficient. If survival was the only goal, immortality would be a major advantage. But in a simulation, finite lifespans could prevent server overload by recycling resources and making room for new players. You might even argue that moments of sudden inexplicable failure, tripping for no reason, forgetting something you've known your whole life, or feeling exhausted without cause, are like the simulation's way of enforcing its restrictions. Just like how some video games reduce your stats temporarily or put invisible walls in your path, reality might be doing the same to keep you within its limits. Interestingly, these limitations don't stop humans from imagining breaking them. Superhero stories, myths of gods, and tales of extraordinary powers have existed in every culture throughout history. Could this be our subconscious remembering that greater abilities are possible but locked away by design? If we are in a simulation, then maybe these limits aren't truly unbreakable. Perhaps what we call miracles, spontaneous recoveries, or genius breakthroughs are moments where someone briefly slips past the code. Maybe there are Kinderbad codes hidden in the fabric of reality, waiting for us to figure them out. Whether or not we're actually inside a simulated universe, the feeling that there are artificial limits on human potential is hard to shake. From physical constraints to mental caps, it's as if we're playing a very advanced, very realistic game. One where someone, somewhere, has set the boundaries. And if that's the case, maybe part of the fun is seeing how far we can push them before the system notices. NPC-like behavior in strangers. Have you ever been walking through a busy street or sitting in a cafe when you notice someone who seems not quite there? They're going through the motions, walking, talking, maybe scrolling on their phone, but it's as if they're just following a preset routine, not actually thinking about what they're doing. This phenomenon is often called NPC-like behavior. And if we're talking about living in a simulation, it's one of the most unsettling signs. In video games, NPC stands for non-player character. These are the background people in the game, shopkeepers, pedestrians, guards, whose job is to make the world feel alive without actually having independent thought. They have limited dialogue, predictable behaviors, and they often repeat the same actions over and over. Now, of course, in real life, every person you meet is a fully conscious human being, but sometimes certain behaviors feel eerily similar to the scripted patterns of NPCs. Think about those moments when you ask a store clerk a question and they respond with something completely unrelated, almost as if your words didn't register, or when you pass the same person every day at the same time wearing the same outfit, walking the same route, carrying the same coffee. In a simulation context, these could be seen as loops, programmed routines that keep the background running without much variation. There's even a strange theory in simulation discussions that not every character you encounter is fully rendered at all times. Just like a video game loads detailed graphics only when you approach them, maybe the simulation allocates more processing power to certain people when you interact with them directly, and when you don't, they're running on autopilot. This would explain why some strangers feel like they're just filler in the background of your life. One of the eerest examples people share online is when strangers respond with oddly generic phrases that seem to fit every conversation. It's like when you say, "What do you think about the weather today, Guillaume?" And they answer, "Yeah, it's been like that lately." No matter if you were talking about rain, sunshine, or snow, these pre-packaged responses feel like the dialogue trees you'd find in a game, enough to keep the interaction moving, but not deep enough to reveal true personality. Another element of NPC-like behavior is the blank stare. You've probably seen it. Someone on a bus or in a store aisle just standing still, looking into the distance, completely unresponsive for several seconds. It's as if the program running them has paused, waiting for input. While in real life this could just be daydreaming, in the simulation theory, it's seen as a loading or lag moment in the code. What's even more unsettling is when you notice multiple people doing the exact same thing at the same time, like 3 different pedestrians all stopping at the same crosswalk, checking their watches in unison, then starting to walk again. Coincidence? Sure, it could be, but in the simulation theory, these synchronized actions are little glitches that reveal the patterns behind the curtain. Some researchers in psychology would say that NPC-like behavior is simply the result of habit. Our brains are wired to conserve energy by automating common tasks, walking to work, driving a familiar route, responding to small talk, so we don't have to consciously think about them. This automation makes life easier, but it can also make us appear to be on autopilot. In a simulated reality, however, that autopilot could be a literal pre-programmed function rather than a biological quirk. And then there's the creepy possibility that some interactions aren't meant to go deep. If reality is simulated, maybe not every stranger has a fully developed backstory, because the simulation doesn't need them to. They exist to fill space, to make the world look busy, but they're not designed for meaningful engagement unless you break the script by doing something unexpected, like starting an unusual conversation or asking a question far outside the normal routine. In fact, that's one way some people test the simulation, by interacting with strangers in unpredictable ways to see if they break character. Most of the time, the person just laughs or plays along, but occasionally the reaction feels strangely delayed, as if the system is scrambling to load a response. Whether that's proof of a simulation or just a reflection of human awkwardness, it's certainly eerie to experience. Of course, from a purely human perspective, NPC-like behavior could just be the result of distraction, stress, or being lost in thought. We all have moments where we go through our day without really being there mentally. But if you're looking for signs that reality might be a simulation, those blank stares, repeated routines, and generic responses can feel like little cracks in the illusion. The next time you're in a public place, try paying closer attention. Notice the patterns. Who walks by at the same time every day, who repeats the same phrases, who moves like they're following invisible rails. Are they just busy humans living their lives? Or are they part of the background code, filling space until the main story, your story, needs them? In the end, whether you believe in the simulation theory or not, spotting NPC-like behavior is a reminder that life is full of patterns, routines, and strange coincidences. And sometimes those patterns are so perfectly aligned that you can't help but wonder, are we all just characters in someone else's game? Sudden shifts in your life. Path without explanation. Have you ever been moving through life, comfortable, confident, and sure of your direction, when suddenly everything changes? One day you're heading toward a certain career, relationship, or dream. Then almost overnight, your entire course veers in a completely different direction. No clear warning, no logical build-up, just a sudden, almost script-like rewrite of your story. These abrupt shifts can feel so strange that you might wonder if some unseen game master just decided to change your mission. In the world of simulation theory, such events resemble storyline adjustments, moments when the simulation modifies your path to create a new narrative or push you toward a different quest. The pattern of abrupt changes. Think about it. Listen, you could be months away from marriage, only for your partner to end things with a reason that barely makes sense. You might be in a stable job, and then, without warning, you're laid off. Or maybe you were set on living in one city forever, when an unexpected opportunity or circumstance suddenly forces you to move across the world. What's even more unsettling is how these shifts often carry a strange sense of inevitability. Deep down, you might feel, this is where I'm supposed to be now, even though you never planned it. It's almost as if the code of your life were written overnight. Simulation and theories take on life resets. In video games or virtual worlds, sudden changes in a player's path happen all the time. A new quest appears, the map shifts, a non-playable character delivers information that changes your mission. From a simulation theory perspective, your life's sudden detour could be similar, a programmed change designed to keep the story engaging or aligned with a main objective the simulation has for you. These shifts could be the result of storyline reprogramming, updating your path to match a new global event or personal growth target. Bug fixes, removing you from situations the simulation decides are no longer beneficial or have broken in some way. Randomized events, adding unpredictability to keep the experience dynamic. The emotional whiplash. Living through these changes can be disorienting. You may feel confused, betrayed, or as if you've lost control of your own life. One moment you're on track to become a doctor, and the next you're running a bakery in another state. Sometimes the shifts are subtle, like drifting away from a friend group without knowing why. Other times they're shockingly abrupt, like waking up and realizing you no longer want the career you've chased for 10 years. What's eerie is that with time, many people look back and realize these changes brought them exactly where they needed to be, almost as if the simulation knew what it was doing all along. Real-life examples. The career pivot. A woman spends years training in law school, then suddenly abandons legal work, sells everything, and becomes a travel photographer. Within months, she's thriving in ways she never imagined. The vanishing relationship. A man in a stable, years-long relationship suddenly feels nothing for his partner. No fight, no betrayal, just an emotional reset. A year later, he meets someone he swears he was meant to be with. The geographic shift. A family relocates due to a random job transfer, only to discover that this new city becomes the setting for all their most important life events. These stories make you wonder, Are they mere coincidences, or part of a bigger, invisible system guiding people towards certain outcomes? How to recognize a life path shift. Signs. You may have experienced a sudden rewrite of your story include: it happened fast. The change unfolded over days or weeks, not years. Logic didn't lead it. The decision or event seemed to happen without a clear rational cause. A strange calm followed. Even if you were upset at first, something inside said, "This is right." Life rearranged itself. Opportunities, people, and resources appeared to support the new path. Why the simulation might do this. If reality is a simulation, sudden life shifts could serve several purposes. Testing adaptability, throwing challenges at you to see how you respond, redirecting your story, steering you toward experiences or lessons you wouldn't have sought on your own, maintaining engagement. Like a good TV series, life may need plot twists to keep things interesting. The comforting side of the theory. While it's unsettling to think your life path might not be entirely in your hands, there's also comfort in the idea that these shifts could be part of a bigger design. If there's purpose behind the chaos, then even the sharpest turns might be guiding you toward where you're meant to be. So the next time your life takes an abrupt, unexplained turn, pause and consider. Is this just bad luck? Or did someone change the level you're playing? Random number patterns appearing everywhere. Have you ever glanced at the clock and noticed it reads 11:11, and then later in the day you see the same numbers on a receipt, a license plate, or even a TV channel? It happens so often that it starts to feel like the universe is trying to tell you something, or perhaps like someone is coding the reality around you with recurring numbers. Random number patterns showing up in your daily life can be one of the eeriest and most compelling signs that we might be living inside a simulation. When you start noticing these patterns, it's rarely just once. For some reason, they tend to appear in clusters, almost as if they're deliberately being placed in your path to catch your attention. The patterns could be repeating numbers like 222, 33, or 77, or they might be more personal, like your birthday popping up everywhere in unexpected places. At first, you may brush it off as coincidence, but as it continues, the thought might cross your mind, is someone or something trying to get me to notice this? Psychologists might explain it through frequency bias, where you notice something more often because your brain has been primed to see it. However, the sheer improbability of certain numbers appearing repeatedly in such varied and unrelated contexts can push even the most rational thinkers into considering the simulation theory. If our reality is being run like a computer program, these patterns could be debugging markers, intentional Easter eggs, or even system glitches. Some people report these numbers appearing during significant life events, almost like checkpoints in a video game. For example, someone might see 44 repeatedly before moving to a new city, or 999 right before meeting a life-changing person. This makes it feel like numbers aren't just random, but instead woven into the narrative of your life. There's also the intriguing idea that numbers are the base language of the universe. Every piece of matter, every sound wave, every movement can be broken down into mathematical formulas. If reality truly operates on code, numbers would naturally bleed through in subtle ways, sometimes obvious enough for us to notice. These recurring patterns might be the equivalent of seeing bits of the source code that runs our reality. Religious and spiritual traditions also interpret repeating numbers as signs from higher powers, angels, spirits, or the universe itself. But under the simulation theory lens, these might just be coded messages embedded in the program, either by the system itself or by whoever or whatever controls it. It's like the simulation is nudging you, hinting that there's more going on beneath the surface. Interestingly, many people who experience these recurring numbers also report a strange sense of synchronicity in their lives during that period. Events align perfectly, opportunities arise out of nowhere, and conversations happen at just the right moment. It's as if the simulation's script is actively guiding you toward a certain path, using numbers as markers to keep you on track. Skeptics will point out that with billions of numbers around us daily, on clocks, signs, receipts, phones, it's not surprising to notice patterns occasionally. But simulation theorists argue that the meaningful timing of these appearances and the emotional charge they carry go far beyond statistical probability. Seeing your late grandmother's birthday number right after thinking about her, for example, can feel too personal to dismiss. In the simulation theory context, random number patterns aren't really random at all. They could be system signatures, small repeated elements that naturally occur when a program runs certain routines. In video games, for example, certain textures or patterns might repeat in different places because they're pulled from the same source file. If our reality operates the same way, number patterns could be our version of that repetition. If you've been noticing these patterns, it might be worth tracking them. Some people keep logs of every time they spot repeating numbers, noting the date, time, and what they were doing or thinking about in that moment. Over time, they find correlations. Perhaps certain numbers always show up during stressful periods, or just before something unexpected happens. Whether it's the universe, your subconscious, or the simulation itself, it's hard to deny that the patterns feel like breadcrumbs leading somewhere. So the next time you catch yourself seeing 1111 again, pause for a moment. Think about what's happening in your life at that exact point. It could be nothing more than a quirky coincidence, or it could be the simulation giving you a little wink, letting you know it's still there, quietly pulling the strings. Extreme luck or bad luck streaks. Have you ever gone through a phase in life where everything just seemed to work in your favor? Winning raffles, landing opportunities out of nowhere, finding money on the street, almost like you had some invisible cheat code switched on. Or, on the flip side, maybe you've experienced the exact opposite. One piece of bad news after another, a string of small accidents, and an uncanny ability to always be in the wrong place at the wrong time. These streaks of extreme luck or bad luck can feel like a strange force is at play. Some people write it off as coincidence, others call it karma, but when you start thinking about the simulation theory, it's easy to wonder if these streaks are more like game modes temporarily switched on or off in your reality. The RNG of life in video games, there's something called RNG, random number generation. It's a way the game decides unpredictable outcomes like loot drops or critical hits. When RNG is on your side, you might get lucky over and over again, even when the odds are tiny. In the context of a simulated universe, luck streaks could be the result of our own cosmic RNG being set unusually high or low for a period of time. Have you noticed how sometimes this RNG feels like it's not random at all? It might line up with major life events, emotional states, or even seem to happen after some unseen update in your life. You're not imagining it. In a simulated reality, these shifts could be coded responses, like algorithms adjusting your experience. The luck flip. One of the strangest things about luck streaks is how quickly they can flip. You might go from having the best week of your life to suddenly facing one setback after another, and there's rarely a logical explanation. It's almost as if someone behind the curtain changed your settings from easy mode to nightmare mode without warning. This sudden flip feels suspiciously similar to debugging or stress testing a system. If our lives are running inside some kind of program, then alternating our luck could be a way to gather data. How do we react to reward? How do we handle loss? The emotional pull. Extreme. Luck and bad luck streaks often come with a heavy emotional impact, and that's worth noting. In game design, moments of sudden fortune or disaster are used to keep players emotionally invested. Think about it. If everything was always easy, you'd get bored. If everything was always hard, you'd give up. So the system might sprinkle in bursts of good or bad fortune to keep us playing. If you've ever had a day where everything lines up perfectly, the traffic is light, the weather is great, and people seem unusually friendly, it's almost like the simulation is rewarding you for staying engaged. On the other hand, if you've had a week where every appliance in your house breaks and you spill coffee on yourself 3 mornings in a row, maybe it's just the system throwing in some obstacles for character development. Breaking the streak. Interestingly, luck streaks, both good and bad, tend to end abruptly once you start paying attention to them. It's as if the act of noticing interferes with the pattern. In quantum physics, observation changes the behavior of particles, so maybe awareness changes the luck code in the simulation. Some people report that deliberately changing their mindset or routine can reset their luck. Others say it shifts naturally after a significant event, almost like the program decided you've had enough of that phase. Too perfect or too unlikely. One of the main simulation clues here is when luck streaks are too perfect or too unlikely. Maybe you meet someone who ends up solving a huge problem in your life, but the chances of meeting them were astronomically small. Or maybe the bad streak is so ridiculous that it feels scripted, like the universe is piling on problems just to see what happens next. In a random natural world, probability should even out over time, but when it doesn't, when the scales stay tipped for too long, that's when people start wondering if there's a hidden algorithm making the call. Final thought. Whether you see extreme luck and bad luck streaks as cosmic chance, divine intervention, or programmed code in a simulated reality, one thing is certain: they make life feel less like a random journey and more like a designed experience. And if it's designed, then maybe we're all just characters in the most elaborate game ever made. So the next time everything goes your way, or nothing does, pay attention. You might just be watching the simulation run one of its little experiments. The bizarre nature of consciousness. If our reality is truly a kind of grand simulation, then the most puzzling and potentially revealing clue might be the very thing you're using right now to process these words: consciousness. Think about it. Despite decades of research and incredible advances in neuroscience, no one can fully explain how a lump of biological tissue inside your skull somehow generates thoughts, emotions, dreams, and awareness. Scientists can tell you which brain areas light up when you smell coffee or remember a childhood birthday, but they can't explain why you experience those moments the way you do. This strange subjective I feeling, what philosophers call qualia, is at the heart of one of the greatest mysteries in existence. In a purely physical world, everything should follow predictable cause and effect patterns. A ball rolls because you push it. A tree grows because it gets sunlight, water, and nutrients. Your phone works because electricity moves through circuits. But when it comes to your thoughts, feelings, and sense of self, it's not that straightforward. Yes, neurons fire, chemicals flow, and signals travel, but how do these physical actions transform into an inner movie of your life? Why do you not just respond to stimuli like a machine, but actually feel the responses? That extra layer, awareness, seems almost unnecessary, unless it's a key part of something larger. Some simulation theorists compare consciousness to a player in a video game. The avatar, your body, moves around inside the game world, following the rules of physics, but the actual player, the one making choices, exists outside of the game. Could our minds be something like that? Maybe our brains are simply interfaces for a higher level consciousness that exists outside the simulated reality. When you log into a game, your player's actions happen in that virtual world, but the awareness behind them exists elsewhere entirely. This could also explain why consciousness is so slippery when scientists try to study it. If awareness is partly outside the system, then any test done inside the system would always hit a wall. It's like trying to figure out where the internet physically exists by looking at your computer screen. You're seeing the effects, not the source. One particularly weird aspect of consciousness is how it sometimes seems to operate outside of normal time. Have you ever had a dream that feels like it lasted hours, but when you wake up only a few minutes have passed? Or been in a dangerous situation where everything seemed to move in slow motion, giving you time to think and react? Some people even report moments of insight or creativity that appear to come from nowhere, as if their mind downloaded the idea from an invisible server. If reality were a simulation, maybe these are moments when the processing speed or data connection between us and the larger system shifts unexpectedly. Another strange clue lies in near-death experiences and altered states of consciousness. People who have come close to dying often describe feeling as though they left their body, saw their surroundings from above, or traveled through some kind of tunnel toward light. While skeptics attribute this to the brain shutting down, others wonder if these experiences are hints that consciousness can operate independently of the body, just like a gamer can step away from the controller without this game world disappearing. And let's not forget how individual each consciousness feels. You're aware of yourself as you in a way that no one else can be. Even if someone knew every detail about your memories, preferences, and personality, they still couldn't be you. This uniqueness is baffling if we think of ourselves as just biological machines, but it fits more neatly if we're each running our own instance of the game, with separate perspectives feeding into the same underlying system. Ultimately, the bizarre nature of consciousness might be one of the strongest arguments for simulation theory. It doesn't neatly fit into our current scientific models, and its elusive, almost magical qualities make it feel like a clue pointing beyond the visible world. If this really is a simulation, consciousness could be the key to proving it, not because it's a glitch, but because it might be the very interface connecting us to the true reality beyond. Reality-bending experiences in near-death moments, near-death experiences, often called NDEs, have fascinated and baffled people for centuries. These moments occur when someone comes frighteningly close to death, whether from a car accident, cardiac arrest, drowning, or any other life-threatening situation, and yet survives. But what's truly intriguing is what many people report happening during those moments. They describe experiences that defy our understanding of time, space, and reality itself. Experiences that make it seem like the rules of our world temporarily dissolve. Many near-death survivors talk about their entire life flashing before their eyes in an instant. This phenomenon is puzzling because, in normal circumstances, your brain can't process decades of memories in a split second. Yet somehow, in that critical moment, people often relive countless events from childhood to the present, as though someone pressed a fast-forward button on their life's footage. Some describe this as watching a movie of their life, while others say they feel like they are actually reliving certain moments, complete with smells, sounds, and emotions, almost as if they've stepped into a fully immersive simulation. Others recount leaving their physical body entirely. They claim to float above themselves, looking down at their own body and the scene around them. They describe what doctors, nurses, or bystanders were doing with eerie accuracy, even when those details would have been impossible to perceive from their actual physical perspective. This out-of-body experience challenges everything we know about consciousness, which is generally believed to be tied to brain activity. If consciousness can exist and observe outside the body, it begs the question, are we more like players in a virtual environment, temporarily disconnected from our avatars? Then there's the strange bending of time reported in these moments. Many NDE survivors say that time slowed down, or even stopped entirely. In the real world, everything might have been happening in seconds, but for them, it felt like hours or even days. This subjective distortion of time is so consistent in accounts across different cultures and eras that it's difficult to dismiss as random imagination. It's almost as if the program running reality was momentarily paused, giving the person more time to process what was happening. Some near-death experiences involve entering an entirely different realm or dimension. People describe walking through tunnels of light, meeting deceased loved ones, or encountering beings they can't fully explain. Entities radiating pure love, peace, or even curiosity. These scenes are often described as feeling more real than reality, with colours more vibrant and sensations more intense than anything possible in our physical world. In a simulation theory context, this could be like temporarily accessing another layer of the program, a hidden environment that normally remains locked away. Another fascinating pattern is the sense of ultimate knowledge or clarity people report. Some say that in those fleeting moments, they understood the meaning of life, the nature of the universe, and the purpose of their own existence. While most can't retain all of this knowledge after returning, they often carry back an unshakable feeling that life has a deeper, more complex design. If we were living inside a simulation, perhaps these moments provide a peek behind the curtain, revealing just enough to hint at the truth before sending us back into the game. Of course, skeptics often argue that near-death experiences are simply the brain's reaction to extreme stress or lack of oxygen. They suggest that hallucinations, memory floods, and time distortion could all be biological survival mechanisms. But this explanation doesn't fully address the many verified cases where people described events they couldn't possibly have witnessed from their physical position, or the fact that so many NDEs share the same features across different individuals, countries, and belief systems. In the simulation theory perspective, near-death moments might be times when the system briefly disconnects us from the main environment, either as a glitch or a program checkpoint. Just like in a video game, when your character is close to defeat, you might suddenly see hidden aspects of the game world, or even be given a chance to restart. Whether these experiences are proof of something beyond our current reality, or simply a remarkable quirk of human biology, they undeniably blur the line between what's real and what's imagined. They remind us that the world we think we know may not be as rigid or as fully understood as we believe, and if you've ever had, or heard, one of these reality-bending near-death stories, it's hard not to wonder, were they just a trick of the mind, or did the simulation briefly show its true face? The feeling of being watched by something beyond. Have you ever been completely alone, maybe in your room at night, in an empty office after hours, or walking down a quiet street, yet you felt that unmistakable sensation that you weren't alone at all. It's as if some invisible presence is observing you, not in a hostile way necessarily, but with an intensity that makes the hair on the back of your neck stand up. This eerie feeling is something countless people have reported throughout history, and it might just be one of the most chilling signs that our reality is not quite what it seems. In the context of the simulation theory, that sensation could be a hint that there's something or someone monitoring our every move, much like a game developer keeping an eye on their virtual world. What makes this phenomenon so fascinating is that it often happens without any obvious cause. You can be in a safe, familiar environment, yet suddenly your body reacts as though someone is standing right behind you. Your breathing changes, your heart rate speeds up, your senses sharpen, almost instinctively scanning for a threat. Psychologists might say this is just a byproduct of our evolutionary survival instincts, an ancient alert system designed to detect predators. But when you feel this in the dead of night, inside your own locked home, that explanation can feel pretty thin. Some people interpret this sensation as spiritual, angels, ghosts, or ancestors watching over them. Others lean toward the paranormal, imagining invisible beings or interdimensional travelers keeping tabs on our lives. But from a simulation perspective, there's a more technological twist. Maybe these watchers aren't supernatural at all. Maybe they're observers from outside our simulated world. Programmers, testers, or even other players, studying how we respond to different scenarios. Think about a video game where the developers can move through the environment unseen by the characters, checking for bugs or tracking gameplay. The player inside the simulation might not see them, but they might feel subtle effects of their presence. A random flicker of light, an unexplained sound, or even a small change in the environment could be a glitch caused by this outside interference. That sensation of being watched might be your brain's way of picking up on something your conscious mind can't quite process. Tiny inconsistencies in the code of reality. Interestingly, the feeling often appears at transitional or uncertain moments in life. Maybe you've made a big decision, you're stepping into a risky situation, or you're simply lost in deep thought about your purpose. It's almost like the watchers become more active when you're at a pivotal point in your story, ensuring you take the right path or recording your choices for later analysis. In simulation terms, this could be the equivalent of checkpoints or flagged events, where the system sends an observer to gather data. Science has tried to explain this phenomenon in various ways. Some studies suggest that the brain's temporoparietal junction, the area responsible for processing self-awareness, can sometimes misfire, creating the illusion of another presence. But even if this is true, it doesn't entirely rule out the simulation theory. After all, if the brain itself is part of the simulated code, then these misfires could be deliberately programmed triggers. The creepiness of this sensation also lies in its timing. It often happens in moments when you are at your most vulnerable, late at night, isolated, or distracted. This is when your mind is more open to noticing subtle changes in the environment. Maybe the simulation adjusts itself when you're not paying close attention, and in doing so leaves behind a faint signal, something you feel as eyes watching you from beyond the visible world. Of course, not all experiences of being watched are unsettling. Some people describe it as a strangely comforting feeling, as if someone is protecting them. In a simulation framework, that could suggest that the observers are not just cold monitors but benevolent entities, making sure the program runs smoothly and the players don't suffer unnecessary harm. It's a strange thought, but perhaps we are part of a carefully tended experiment, and the watchers are simply ensuring we survive long enough to play our roles. The real question is, if we are being watched, why? Is it for entertainment, like characters in a giant cosmic reality show? Is it for study to see how humans evolve and adapt? Or is it simply maintenance, like a technician making sure the machine doesn't overheat? We may never know, but that persistent, uncanny feeling that someone is just out of sight keeps us wondering. The next time you feel that prickling sensation on your skin, pause for a moment, look around, not just with your eyes, but with your awareness. Listen for faint sounds. Notice if anything in your surroundings feels just slightly off. Maybe nothing will happen, or maybe you'll catch a glimpse, just for a fraction of a second, of the curtain being pulled back. In a simulation, even the smallest glitch can be a doorway to the truth. If the simulation theory is correct, then perhaps that feeling of being watched is not paranoia at all, but the most direct piece of evidence we'll ever experience, that our world is being observed, recorded, and maybe even guided by forces far beyond our understanding. inexplicable changes in objects or places you know. Well, imagine walking into your living room and noticing that your favorite framed photo is slightly different. Not just tilted, but the people in it seem to be standing in a different order. Or maybe you pass by a local shop you've known for years, but the sign is suddenly a different colour, or the layout inside has changed in a way that feels wrong. You ask around and everyone else insists it's always been like that. You start to question yourself. Are you misremembering? Or did reality just alter itself without your permission? These are the moments that can make you feel like you're living inside a simulation, as if the game you're in just refreshed a scene and forgot to keep the original details consistent. We've all experienced small changes in our environment that don't add up. Maybe your keys are on the kitchen counter when you're certain you left them in the hallway. Or the park bench you remember being painted blue is now green. Sometimes these changes are so small that you shrug them off thinking your memory is playing tricks. But other times, they're glaring enough to make you stop in your tracks. This phenomenon can feel almost like a glitch, as though some invisible system updated the world around you, but your brain kept the old version stored. Think of it like a video game where the developers push a patch to fix a bug or update scenery, but your save file still remembers the old design. If our reality is indeed a simulation, then these moments might be the real-life equivalent of those patches. It's worth noting that science has a more grounded explanation for some of these situations. Human memory is notoriously unreliable. We fill in details, make assumptions, and sometimes even rewrite past experiences without realizing it. Psychologists call this memory reconstruction, and it explains why witnesses to the same event often remember details differently. So yes, in some cases, your brain might just be misremembering the color of that bench or the location of that store sign. But here's where it gets eerie. What about when multiple people remember the old version too? That's when we get into Mandela effect territory. Shared false memories that can't be easily explained away. You might not be the only one who swears that the old coffee shop had a different logo, or that your grandmother's clock used to chime on the hour, even though now it doesn't. Some theorists believe these changes could be evidence of timeline shifts, where we slip between slightly different versions of reality without noticing. In these theories, the universe is made up of countless parallel worlds, each with tiny differences. A shift could be as small as the color of an object changing, or as big as historical events playing out differently. You might be carrying memories from one version of reality while living in another. And then there's the simulation theory angle. Maybe these changes are simply resource optimizations. If the system running our reality needs to free up memory or reconfigure certain elements, it might alter objects or places without us knowing. For most people, the changes would go unnoticed. But for the observant few, those who pay close attention to their surroundings, these inconsistencies stick out like a sore thumb. There's also a more unsettling possibility. If the simulation doesn't need every single detail to be perfectly consistent, maybe it doesn't even bother maintaining a stable reality until someone is actively looking. This idea is called lazy rendering in gaming, where the game only loads what's directly in front of the player to save processing power. Could it be that our reality works the same way? That the park you're walking past today wasn't fully rendered the last time you saw it, and now it's been built slightly differently? Some people claim they've documented these changes. They'll take photos of an object or place only to later find that the details in the picture don't match what's there now. Is it trick photography, editing, or an unintentional capture of a glitch? In the end, whether these changes are due to the flaws of human memory, parallel universe shifts, or the quirks of a simulated world, they have one thing in common. They make us doubt the stability of the reality we live in, and that doubt can be more unsettling than the change itself. So the next time you walk into a familiar place and something feels off, pay attention. Ask yourself, was it always this way, or did the world just quietly update when you weren't looking? The universe is fine-tuning for life. If you've ever looked around and thought, wow, the universe feels almost too perfect for life, you're not alone. In fact, this observation has fascinated scientists, philosophers, and deep thinkers for decades. The idea is simple but mind-blowing. The physical constants of the universe, the numbers and rules that govern reality, seem perfectly set to allow life to exist, and if they were just slightly different, life as we know it wouldn't stand a chance. Let's break this down. The universe runs on math. Things like the speed of light, the strength of gravity, and the charge of an electron are all incredibly precise. These aren't numbers that can vary without consequence. If gravity were just a tiny bit stronger, stars might burn out too quickly for planets and life to develop. If it were weaker, stars might not form at all. The same goes for other forces like electromagnetism and the strong nuclear force. These constants are so exact that it's like the dials on the cosmic control panel were adjusted with life in mind. Here's the crazy part. The odds of these constants falling into the exact range that makes life possible are so small that some scientists say it's almost like winning the lottery, not just once, but billions of times in a row. Imagine tossing a dart across the galaxy and hitting a bullseye the size of a grain of sand. That's the scale of improbability we're talking about. There are a few possible explanations for this fine-tuning, and each one sounds like it came straight from a science fiction novel. One is the anthropic principle, which basically says, of course the universe is fine-tuned for life, otherwise we wouldn't be here to notice it. In other words, the only reason we can ask the question is because we happen to exist in a reality where conditions allow us to exist. This explanation is kind of like a cosmic well duh, but it doesn't really solve the mystery, it just points it out. Another explanation is the multiverse theory. This idea suggests there could be countless universes out there, each with different constants and rules. Most of them might be barren and lifeless, but we just happen to live in the one that hit the jackpot for life. Think of it like rolling an infinite set of dice. Some rolls will produce a universe that works for life, and we happen to be in one of those rare lucky rolls. And then there's the possibility that the universe's fine-tuning is intentional. This is where the simulation theory creeps in. If our reality is a kind of program running on some unimaginable computer, then whoever or whatever designed it could have simply coded the constants to support life. In that case, the precision isn't a coincidence. It's a feature. It's the equivalent of a game designer setting the perfect difficulty level for the player's survival. We also see this fine-tuning reflected in Earth's own conditions. Our planet is the perfect distance from the sun, not too hot, not too cold. We have just the right mix of gases in the atmosphere. Water exists here in all three states, solid, liquid and gas, creating the perfect environment for life. Even our moon plays a role, stabilizing Earth's tilt and creating tides that influence life cycles. Change any of these factors just a little, and things could go very differently. Some argue that life could adapt to different conditions, so maybe we're only calling it fine-tuning because it suits us. But even if life could exist in other forms, the specific combination of factors we have here is unusually harmonious. It's like finding a piano in perfect tune in the middle of a desert. You can argue about whether the tuning was necessary, but you can't ignore how precise it is. The fine-tuning mystery doesn't just sit in science labs, it seeps into philosophy and spirituality. For some, it's proof of a creator or intelligent designer. For others, it's just another reminder of how strange and improbable existence really is. And for simulation theory believers, it's one of the strongest arguments that our reality might be artificial, because in a purely random universe, things shouldn't be this perfect. At the end of the day, whether the universe's precision is an accident, a necessity, or a deliberate design, it's a humbling reminder of how fragile and rare life might be. If nothing else, the fine-tuning question makes you pause and realize just how wild it is that you're even here, reading these words in a universe that seems to have rolled the dice in your favor. If the cosmos is a simulation, then someone, or something, set it up so we could exist, thrive, and ponder the nature of reality. And whether that someone is a programmer, a cosmic architect, or just the blind luck of infinite possibilities, well, that's a mystery we might never solve. Repeating life scenarios, as if on a loop. Have you ever found yourself stuck in what feels like the same situation over and over again, almost like the world hit repeat on your life? You change jobs, move to a new city, meet different people, yet somehow you end up dealing with eerily familiar scenarios. It's not just déjà vu, it's a full-blown loop. The circumstances, the challenges, and even the emotional tone feel identical to something you've been through before. And it makes you wonder, are we truly moving forward, or is the simulation we live in recycling old storylines? One of the strangest aspects of life is how repetitive it can be. You might have the same type of argument in every relationship you've had. Or maybe every workplace you enter seems to have the same kind of a boss, the micromanager, the absent leader, or the overly friendly one who suddenly turns cold. It's as if the characters change, but the script remains the same. In a purely natural random world, you'd expect life to offer more variety, Yet these repeating scenarios suggest that something is reusing code, just like in a video game. Think about how games work. Developers don't create infinite unique experiences for every player. They reuse certain events, environments, and quests with small variations. Maybe that's what's happening here. The simulation might recycle events to test how we react, to teach us lessons, or perhaps just to keep things efficient. If we really are in a programmed reality, it would make sense for it to conserve processing power by reusing familiar situations instead of generating entirely new ones from scratch. These loops aren't always subtle either. You might notice that every few years, you're faced with the same financial dilemma, the same health scare, or the same type of friendship drama. You can move across the world, switch careers, or change your habits, but the pattern still finds you. It's as if there's an invisible algorithm tracking your progress and deciding, okay, time to run this sequence again. Some people see these loops as cosmic lessons, that life is giving you repeated opportunities to pass the test or make a different choice this time. Others see them as glitches or evidence that reality is operating on some kind of preset cycle. Either way, the sensation of being trapped in the same storyline can be incredibly unsettling, especially when you notice it across decades of your life. Psychologists might explain this through something called behavioral patterns. If you're drawn to certain types of people or situations, your choices might unconsciously steer you into similar experiences again and again. But what if it's more than just your choices? What if the world itself has structural loops built into it? The same way weather cycles repeat, maybe events in our lives repeat according to some hidden cosmic schedule. There's also the eerie possibility that these loops aren't about you at all, they're about the simulation itself. Just like a game has seasonal events or limited story arcs, our reality might have a finite number of unique scenarios. When you've gone through them all, the system simply starts over. And if you're especially observant, you start noticing the repetitions sooner than others. Sometimes these repeating scenarios are comforting, like meeting someone who feels exactly like a close friend you had years ago. But other times, they can be frustrating, like facing the same obstacle for what feels like the 100th time. If you have ever felt like you're running in circles in life, it's worth asking, is it just bad luck, or is the simulation stuck in a loop? And here's the mind-bending part. If these loops are real, maybe breaking them requires doing something drastically different. Choosing an unexpected reaction, saying yes when you always say no, or walking away when you always fight to stay. In games, this kind of unexpected move can trigger entirely new storylines. Maybe the same is true here. Whether they're the product of psychology, fate, or code, repeating life scenarios give us one of the strongest sensations that reality might not be as random as it appears. If you keep facing the same situations, no matter how much you try to change your life, maybe it's not you that's repeating. Maybe it's the program you're living in. Technology evolving too perfectly. Sometimes the speed and precision with which technology advances can feel almost too perfect. Like someone, somewhere, is making sure every upgrade and innovation happens exactly on schedule. In a world where computing power doubles roughly every 2 years, thanks to what's known as Moore's Law, it's easy to feel like this is all part of a planned timeline, rather than a chaotic, organic progression. Sure, humans are innovative, but when you look at the way technology fits seamlessly into our lives, smartphones replacing dozens of separate devices, AI understanding human speech better each year, and digital tools syncing across the globe, it's hard not to wonder, are we just following a script? Think about the leaps we've made in just a few decades. In the early 2000s, having a camera on your phone felt futuristic. Fast forward to today, and those same devices can scan your face, translate languages in real time, guide you with the GPS, and edit professional quality videos in seconds. The jump is massive, and yet it all happened without major gaps, delays, or catastrophic dead ends. It's almost as if the simulation has a built-in system for rolling out updates, keeping our tech aligned with the story it wants us to live. There's also something uncanny about how technology seems to evolve just in time to solve problems we didn't even realize we had. Streaming platforms rose just as physical media sales began to collapse. Social media exploded at the exact moment high-speed internet became widely available. Cloud storage came along just when our devices started generating huge amounts of data. These aren't just coincidences, they look like carefully timed code releases. Artificial intelligence might be the most suspicious example of this too perfect progression. For decades, AI was clunky, slow, and far from human-level interaction. Then, almost overnight, it became capable of creating realistic images, writing complex text, and even holding conversations that feel natural. It's as if someone flipped a switch, unlocking the next level of our technological environment. The sudden leaps, rather than gradual, messy trial and error, don't feel entirely organic. Another strange thing is how technology often evolves in ways that feel inevitable, regardless of who's developing it. Even if two teams are on opposite sides of the world, working independently, they'll often end up creating nearly identical solutions at the same time. The telephone, the airplane, and even the theory of evolution were all developed independently by multiple people around the same period. In the tech world, this happens constantly. Whether it's voice assistants, facial recognition, or wireless charging, the breakthroughs often appear in parallel. In a real random world, you'd expect more chaos and diversity of approaches, but in a simulation, it would make sense that the update rolls out to everyone at once. There's also the suspiciously smooth integration between old and new technology. In reality, major technological jumps should cause more confusion, incompatibility, and disruption. Yet somehow, when new systems arrive, they often work seamlessly with the existing infrastructure. Our new phones connect instantly to older Wi-Fi networks. New game consoles still play older titles, and apps from years ago often run just fine on updated devices. That's not always the case in software created by humans. It's often messy and full of bugs. But in our reality, these transitions are eerily smooth, like a perfectly maintained simulation environment. Of course, the counterargument is that human progress is just accelerating because of our ability to share knowledge faster than ever before. The internet allows inventors and engineers to build on each other's ideas instantly. But even then, the exact precision and timing of these advancements feels scripted. Like every time society reaches a certain point, the game unlocks a new tool to keep us moving forward in the desired direction. What's even more thought-provoking is how technology often mirrors concepts from science fiction. Books, movies, and games that came out years before the tech was even possible. Star Trek had communicators long before cell phones existed. Science fiction authors imagined virtual reality, self-driving cars, and even tablet computers decades before they became real. It's almost as if these fictional ideas were spoilers for upcoming simulation updates, preparing us so we wouldn't be shocked when they appeared in real life. So, is technology evolving because of human ingenuity alone, or is there a deeper hand guiding it all? If this really is a simulation, then technology might be one of the clearest signs that we're living inside a controlled environment, where advancements aren't just random but part of a bigger plan. The pace, precision, and just-in-time nature of each breakthrough might not be a coincidence at all. It might be the simulation making sure the world unfolds exactly as intended. If that's the case, then what's next? Maybe the simulation is preparing to roll out something that will change our reality entirely. Technology's so advanced it makes our current tools look like stone carvings. Or maybe one day, we'll realize that all of our inventions were never ours to begin with. They were just features waiting to be unlocked. Natural laws that could be programmed rules. Have you ever noticed how the universe seems to follow a set of strict, unbreakable rules? Gravity always pulls things toward the ground. Light always travels at the same speed in a vacuum. Water always boils at 100 degrees Celsius at sea level. It's as if reality runs on a flawless code, like the laws of physics or the programming language of existence itself. This idea forms the basis of one of the most intriguing signs that we might be living in a simulation. The possibility that natural laws are actually programmed rules put in place by some cosmic developer. Think about it. In video games, the world is governed by a set of coded rules. A character can only jump so high. Objects fall at a certain speed. The sun rises and sets at fixed intervals. These mechanics are not random. They are hard-coded into the game engine to create consistency and predictability. Similarly, the laws of nature appear fixed and universal, applying equally to everything from the tiniest particle to the largest galaxy. No matter where you are in the observable universe, those rules still apply, almost like a master file of settings loaded at the start of the simulation. Take gravity, for example. We can measure it with astonishing precision. It never flickers or changes unpredictably. Even more fascinating is the way it interacts with space and time itself, bending them in ways we still don't fully understand. Why does it behave exactly this way and not some other way? If you were coding a universe, gravity would be one of those non-negotiable settings, something you program once and let it run everywhere. The same goes for the speed of light. It's one of the most bizarre constants in physics because, unlike almost anything else, it doesn't change regardless of how fast you're moving. No matter how you chase it, you can't catch it. This would be like having a fixed refresh rate in a game that never alters, no matter how chaotic things get. Some scientists have wondered if constants like this are clues, like fingerprints left behind by whoever wrote the rules. The predictability of natural laws is also what makes science possible. Without fixed rules, experiments would be meaningless. Imagine if the boiling point of water changed every day, or if gravity sometimes decided to reverse itself. We wouldn't be able to trust any observation, and life itself would be chaos. The fact that our reality behaves so consistently could mean one of two things. Either we're in a naturally ordered universe, or we're in a simulation with an extremely stable code base. Another strange aspect is how mathematical the universe is. The natural laws can be expressed with elegant equations, sometimes so simple it's almost suspicious. Maxwell's equations for electromagnetism, Einstein's equation for general relativity, or Newton's laws of motion are all concise and universally applicable. If the universe were truly chaotic and unplanned, would it really be describable by neat little formulas? Or is that the sign of a designer who loves mathematical elegance? There's also the question of why these laws are perfectly tuned for life. A slight change in the gravitational constant, the charge of the electron, or the expansion rate of the universe could make life impossible. It's like the game's difficulty settings were adjusted just right so that complex beings could evolve and explore the environment. Is that just luck, or is it intentional design? And here's something even more fascinating. In video games, glitches happen when the programmed rules clash or are stretched beyond what the developers anticipated. Could the strange phenomena we observe in quantum physics, like particles acting differently when observed, be our universe's version of a glitch? Maybe the rules are solid at our scale but behave oddly when you zoom in too far, just like game textures breaking down when you press your character's face against the wall. If the laws of nature are truly programmed, that also raises the question, can they ever be hacked? In games, players sometimes find ways to exploit the code, jumping higher than intended, passing through walls, or triggering infinite resources. Could advanced civilizations in our universe have figured out how to manipulate the source code of reality, effectively performing what we would call miracles or advanced technology? That could explain why ancient myths often tell stories of beings who could defy gravity, travel instantly, or bend time. Whether or not we're in a simulation, the fact remains: the natural laws are precise, universal, and unchanging. They behave exactly like programmed rules designed to keep the system stable. Maybe we'll never know if they were written by a cosmic coder, or if they're simply the result of the universe's nature. But every time you drop something and watch it fall at the same speed it always has, you might just be witnessing the rules of reality playing out flawlessly, just like they have since the moment our game began. Uncanny Valley. Effect. Why some things just feel wrong. Have you ever looked at a robot, a wax figure, or even a CGI character in a movie and felt a strange wave of discomfort wash over you? It's not fear exactly, and it's not simple dislike. It's that eerie, unsettling feeling that something is almost human, but not quite right. This is known as the uncanny valley effect, and it's one of the eeriest psychological phenomena out there. In the context of living in a simulation, the uncanny valley could be a hint that our reality itself is filled with moments and objects that aren't fully rendered in a way that convinces our subconscious. The term uncanny valley was first coined by Japanese roboticist Masahiro Mori in the 1970s. He observed that as robots become more human-like, our comfort level with them increases, but only up to a point. Once they get too close to being perfectly human but still have subtle flaws, our reaction sharply drops into discomfort. That's the valley. It's like climbing a mountain of realism only to trip and fall into a dark, creepy pit before reaching the summit of complete acceptance. Think of movie characters like early CGI humans from the early 2000s. Movies that aimed for realism but missed the mark. The skin might look slightly too smooth, the eyes a little too glassy, the movements just slightly unnatural. On the surface, they're almost real, but your brain is screaming that something is wrong. Why? One theory is that our brains evolved to detect very small signs of danger in others, such as sickness or death. If something looks alive but doesn't move or behave exactly like a human should, it may trigger a subconscious survival response. Our instincts might be saying this looks human, but something is off. Be careful, but what if there's more to it? If we're living in a simulation, the uncanny valley effect could be our perception brushing against the edges of the rendering engine of reality. Maybe the reason certain human-like representations make us uneasy is because they're not quite accurate to the real code of existence. They're like low-resolution replicas in an otherwise high-definition world. That flicker of discomfort could be our mind's way of sensing a glitch, like noticing a texture in a video game that didn't load properly. The uncanny valley doesn't just apply to robots and CGI either. Some people report feeling the same eeriness when meeting certain strangers, people who look completely normal at first glance but give off a sense that they're not quite right. Maybe their smile lingers a fraction of a second too long. Maybe their eyes don't quite match their facial expression. Maybe their movements feel rehearsed. If this sounds a little like the NPC theory, where some people in our lives are like background characters, it's because these sensations might be connected. The uncanny valley could be the emotional warning sign that you're interacting with something or someone who isn't operating on the same rules as the rest of reality. Art has played with this idea for centuries. Many old paintings, dolls, and religious statues seem to have a lifelike quality that unsettles people. Sometimes the discomfort comes from symmetry that is too perfect or details that are too exact, pushing our senses into overdrive. It's as if our brain is expecting the subtle imperfections of real life and gets confused when they're not there. This is why hyper-realistic androids or holograms can sometimes seem creepier than an obviously artificial cartoon character. At least the cartoon is clearly fake. There's no deception in it. In the digital age, the uncanny valley has only deepened. As AI becomes more advanced, we're encountering more voices, faces, and movements generated entirely by algorithms. These creations can be stunningly realistic, but they often hover right at the edge of believability. You might not even consciously notice what's wrong, but your subconscious does. Maybe the blink rate is slightly unnatural. Maybe the micro-expressions don't align with the tone of voice. It's a kind of sensory dissonance. Your eyes and ears are telling you this is real, but your gut instinct whispers something's off. If the simulation theory is true, the uncanny valley might be the result of encountering something rendered differently from the rest of our reality. Think of it like walking through a beautifully crafted video game world and suddenly seeing a character or object with outdated graphics. The mismatch catches your attention instantly. Perhaps, in our reality, these moments are inevitable. Slip-ups in the coding where something is generated close to reality but doesn't quite meet the full standard. This raises an even stranger thought. What if we ourselves occasionally fall into the uncanny valley for others? If we are avatars in a simulation, maybe the rendering of our own bodies and behaviors fluctuates at times. Ever had a day when people acted slightly distant toward you for no clear reason? Or when your own reflection in the mirror seemed subtly unfamiliar? It's possible that in those moments, your simulation file wasn't running at 100% fidelity. In the end, whether it's a product of evolution, psychology, or simulation coding, the uncanny valley reminds us that reality isn't always smooth. There are edges where things don't quite line up, moments when the illusion flickers. And in those moments, your instincts might just be giving you a rare glimpse into the gaps of whatever this reality truly is. Sudden collective shifts in society's beliefs. Have you ever noticed how, sometimes, it feels like everyone's opinion on a certain topic changes almost overnight? One week, people seem to think one way about an idea, a product, a celebrity, or a social issue, and then suddenly, without warning, the collective mood just flips. It can be so fast and widespread that it almost feels like an invisible switch has been flipped. And if we're talking about signs we might be living in a simulation, this is a big one. In normal, natural human behavior, opinions tend to shift slowly. Change usually comes with gradual exposure, debates, and the passing of time. But in our modern world, there are countless examples where society seems to hit update all on its beliefs and preferences. This can make you wonder, is this simply the result of media influence and social networking, or is there something deeper going on, something programmed? One example that often comes to mind is the sudden rise and fall of certain trends. Think about fashion. There are styles that stay unpopular for years, and then one day they're everywhere. Retro sneakers, mum jeans, certain hairstyles, they all seem to return like someone just copied an old file back into the system. And it's not just fashion. The same thing happens with music genres, food crazes, internet slang, and even the public image of well-known people. Sometimes the change is even stranger. There have been moments when entire populations shift their stance on important social topics that have been debated for decades, and suddenly there's a huge collective change in thinking. These shifts don't always have a clear trigger. There's no single event that explains the massive turnaround. It's like the code of our reality gets patched and everyone's beliefs update to match the new version. If we look at this from a simulation theory perspective, there are a few possible explanations. In a computer simulation, the players, that's us, might have certain thought patterns influenced by hidden algorithms. If the designers wanted society to take a new direction, they could simply adjust the parameters, sending subtle signals through media, conversation, and events. We wouldn't notice the direct manipulation. We'd just wake up one day and feel differently about something without knowing why. Of course, the skeptic's view is that this is all just the result of social dynamics. Humans are social creatures, heavily influenced by group thinking. When a small but influential group changes its mind, others follow, and their effect spreads like wildfire. Social media has only amplified this phenomenon, making global opinion shifts possible in record time. But here's the thing. Even with that explanation, the speed and synchronization of some belief changes still feel unnatural. Think about how quickly certain phrases enter the language. A meme, a joke, or a slogan can go from non-existent to being used by millions in a matter of days. Or how the public can go from loving a celebrity to cancelling them practically overnight, even without any new evidence or information. These instant changes are suspiciously similar to software updates, where the whole system gets new features or removes old ones instantly. Another interesting clue is how these shifts often come in waves. It's not just one belief that changes, multiple things start shifting at the same time. A sudden obsession with minimalism in design might happen alongside a global shift in how people feel about environmental issues. It's as if the simulation is introducing a new theme, and all parts of society are being aligned to fit it. What's even more unsettling is when these collective shifts align across completely different cultures. In theory, different parts of the world should have different timelines for changes in belief. But in reality, we often see trends, values, and ideas spreading globally at nearly the same moment. Whether it's a style of clothing, a health fad, or a moral stance, it can feel like the entire planet is part of one massive, interconnected network, which of course is exactly what a simulation would be. If these sudden shifts are evidence of a simulation, it raises fascinating questions. Who's deciding what the updated beliefs should be? Are they testing how humanity reacts to certain changes? Are these shifts part of some grand storyline, or are they just routine maintenance? The truth is, we can't know for sure. Maybe it's just human psychology and the power of shared communication. Or maybe, somewhere in the unseen code of our reality, a programmer is pressing refresh, and we're all just following the new script without realizing it. Either way, the next time you notice society's mood changing seemingly overnight, take a step back and think about it. Are we just changing our minds naturally, or is someone or something changing them for us? Animals. Acting with unnatural intelligence. Every now and then, animals surprise us in ways that make us question everything we thought we knew about them. We expect our pets to learn simple commands, wild creatures to follow their instincts, and nature to move along predictable patterns. But sometimes an animal behaves in a way that feels far too intelligent, almost human-like, or even beyond what humans can do. These moments make us wonder, are animals just more capable than we realize, or is something else at play in the program of our reality? Think about crows and ravens. Science has already proven they're incredibly smart. They can recognize human faces, remember them for years, and even warn other birds about which people to avoid. But some stories go beyond logic, like crows leaving gifts for people who've been kind to them or dropping pebbles into a container of water to raise the level high enough to drink. These aren't just random instincts. They look like carefully planned actions, almost as if the birds are following a sequence of logical steps like a puzzle-solving AI. Or consider octopuses, those mysterious creatures of the deep. They've been seen unscrewing jar lids from the inside to escape, sneaking out of aquariums at night to steal food from neighbouring tanks, and even turning off lights by squirting water at electrical equipment. In some cases, their problem-solving skills seem so advanced that marine biologists have admitted it feels like they're working with alien minds. The way they camouflage themselves instantly, matching colour, then the texture, and even movement, is almost like watching a computer render a perfect disguise in real time. Then there are dolphins, famous for their playful and social behaviour. But in certain encounters, dolphins have been known to protect humans from sharks by circling them, guide lost swimmers back to shore, or even sense a pregnant woman and respond differently around her. These moments go beyond coincidence. They suggest an awareness of our situation, an ability to read intentions, and perhaps even empathy that rivals our own. Of course, skeptics argue that we're simply anthropomorphizing animals, projecting human traits onto them. But what if this isn't projection? What if the reality we live in is designed with interconnected awareness, where humans and animals share a deeper layer of communication than we've been taught to believe? In a simulation-like world, NPCs wouldn't have to be human. They could take the form of animals, coded with just enough free will to create unpredictable, fascinating interactions. Cats, for example, have a way of appearing at exactly the right time. Some pet owners swear their cats know when they're sick or sad, curling up beside them even before the symptoms are obvious. Dogs too can detect illnesses like cancer or predict seizures before they happen. Science often tries to explain this as heightened senses of smell or behaviour reading, but the precision and timing sometimes feel uncanny, as if animals are reading from an invisible script of events before they unfold. Even insects sometimes display unexpected intelligence. Ant colonies operate like highly efficient cities, with specialized roles, coordinated construction projects, and even farming practices where they raise fungus for food. Bees navigate using complex communication dances that transfer precise directions to food sources miles away. While these behaviors can be explained as evolved instincts, their perfection and consistency hint at something more, like following coded rules within the world's operating system. In rare but chilling examples, animals seem to predict natural disasters. Hours before earthquakes or tsunamis, wildlife has been observed fleeing from danger zones long before humans detect anything. Birds leave nesting grounds, dogs howl or hide, and fish vanish from shallows. Are they simply sensing vibrations and pressure changes, or is there a deeper awareness, like reading the next scene in the unfolding program of reality? Some of the strangest reports come from animals interacting with technology. Parrots have learned to use Alexa and Siri to order treats. Monkeys have been observed using money-like tokens in experiments, and even stealing them from each other in ways that mirror human economic behavior. These are more than just instincts. They're signs of adaptability, planning, and in some cases, manipulation, the very things we associate with higher-level intelligence. If we take the simulation theory seriously, it's possible that the rules for animal behavior are not fixed. Instead, the system might allow for glitches or moments of unscripted brilliance, just enough to make us question reality without breaking the illusion completely. Perhaps these moments are intentional, little breadcrumbs to hint at a deeper truth, that intelligence is not limited to humans, and that the minds we share this planet with may be running more complex code than we imagine. So the next time you see a squirrel figure out how to bypass a bird feeder's defenses, or watch a dog open a door handle with skill, consider the possibility that you've just witnessed a brief peek behind the curtain. Maybe these moments are more than cute stories. They could be reminders that the world's players are more connected, more aware, and more unpredictable than the game manual suggests. Because in a reality where animals act in ways that seem to break the rules, one question always lingers: who or what wrote those rules in the first place? The Existence of Simulation Theories by Umbria Scientists. The idea that our reality might be a simulation has long been the stuff of science fiction, inspiring books, movies, and philosophical debates. But what surprises many people is that this theory isn't just discussed by storytellers or internet conspiracy theorists. It has been seriously considered by some of the world's most respected scientists, philosophers, and tech leaders. They are not claiming that we are definitely living in a simulation, but they do think the possibility is worth exploring. One of the most famous modern proponents of this discussion is philosopher Nick Bostrom from the University of Oxford. In 2003, Bostrom published a paper that presented a now famous thought experiment called the simulation argument. He proposed that at least one of the following statements must be true. Almost all civilizations at our level of technological development go extinct before they reach the capability of creating simulations of reality. Civilizations that do reach that level have no interest in running simulations of conscious beings. We are almost certainly living in a computer simulation. The idea behind this argument is simple but powerful. If technology continues to advance, future civilizations could have computing power so vast that they could simulate entire worlds, complete with people who believe they are living in a real reality. If even one civilization decided to run millions of such simulations, then simulated worlds would vastly outnumber the one original reality. Statistically, that would make it more likely that we are inside one of these simulations than in the base reality. This isn't just philosophy, it's also been discussed by scientists working in physics, cosmology, and computer science. Theoretical physicist Silas Bean from the University of Bonn has explored whether our universe might have detectable limits if it were simulated, similar to how video games have pixelation or resolution limits. The idea is that if space itself were made up of a finite grid of points, like pixels in a screen, then there might be a way to detect that grid through extremely precise measurements of cosmic rays or the behavior of particles. In 2016, at the American Museum of Natural History, a public debate titled "Is the Universe a Simulation?" brought together some of the brightest minds to discuss the concept. Nobel Prize-winning physicist George Smoot suggested that, while we have no concrete proof, we should not dismiss the possibility. Smoot pointed out that humanity has already created extremely realistic virtual worlds, and the speed of technological advancement means we could be capable of creating lifelike simulations in the not-so-distant future. Another influential voice is Elon Musk, the CEO of SpaceX and Tesla. Musk has publicly stated that he believes there is a very high probability, somewhere around billions to 1, that we are living in base reality. His reasoning is similar to Bostrom's statistical argument. If simulated worlds can be created, and if technology continues to improve, then it is extremely unlikely that we just happen to be in the original universe instead of one of the countless simulations. Of course, not all scientists agree. Some point out that this theory is currently untestable. A core part of the scientific method is that ideas should be falsifiable, meaning that there should be a way to prove them wrong. If we can't find a way to test for the existence of a simulation, then some researchers argue that it falls more into philosophy than hard science. Others caution that even if we could detect anomalies in the universe that look like programming glitches, it wouldn't necessarily prove we're in a simulation. It could just mean we don't fully understand the laws of physics yet. Still, there are ongoing efforts to think of possible experiments. For example, researchers have looked at the distribution of high-energy cosmic rays to see if they reveal a kind of pixel pattern that would indicate a simulated structure. So far, no clear evidence has been found, but the idea continues to inspire creative approaches. There's also a psychological dimension to all this. Some scientists and philosophers warn that taking the simulation theory too seriously without evidence could lead to strange or even harmful thinking. If people start believing that nothing is real and that their actions don't matter, it could change how they behave in the real world. On the other hand, others argue that the possibility of a simulation doesn't change our everyday reality. Whether simulated or not, the experiences we have and the choices we make are still meaningful to us. At its core, the simulation hypothesis is a modern twist on ancient philosophical questions. Long before computers existed, thinkers like Plato imagined scenarios in which what we perceive as reality might be an illusion. In some ways, the simulation theory is simply that age-old question reimagined through the lens of modern technology and computing. Whether it's true or not, the fact that serious scientists are willing to consider it shows just how far human curiosity reaches. It's a reminder that we still know very little about the ultimate nature of reality. Maybe we will someday find a way to test it. Maybe we will discover that we are indeed living in base reality. Or maybe, just maybe, we'll realize that our entire existence is running on some unimaginably advanced cosmic computer. Until then, the simulation hypothesis remains one of the most fascinating, unsettling, and mind-bending possibilities in modern science. Unseen forces that influence decisions. Have you ever made a choice and then later wondered, why did I do that? Maybe it was something small, like taking a different route home for no reason, only to find out you avoided a traffic jam or an accident. Or maybe it was something big, like suddenly deciding to quit your job, move to a new city, or start a relationship you hadn't planned. Sometimes our decisions seem to come from a place deeper than conscious thought, almost as if there's something unseen guiding our actions. Psychologists might tell you this is intuition, the brain's way of processing information faster than you realize. Our minds are constantly taking in details, patterns, body language, tiny environmental cues, and forming judgments before we're even aware of it. But what if intuition is only part of the story? What if something else, something invisible, is subtly steering the wheel? There are countless accounts of people making choices they can't explain. Soldiers in combat who move a split second before a bullet passes where they were standing. Parents who wake in the middle of the night with the overwhelming urge to check on their child, only to find the child in danger. Travelers who miss a flight for no logical reason, then learn it crashed. Are these just lucky guesses, or is there an unseen force influencing the outcome? One theory comes from the idea of the collective unconscious, proposed by psychologist Carl Jung. He believed that all humans share a deep mental layer filled with universal symbols and instincts, something like a mental network that connects us all. According to this idea, our decisions might be shaped not only by our personal experiences, but also by this shared web of knowledge. That strange pull you feel toward a certain decision might not be random. It could be a ripple coming from that collective field. Others point to the possibility of energy fields, or even subtle forms of communication we don't yet understand. Science has shown that animals can sense magnetic fields, predict weather changes, and detect earthquakes before they happen. Could humans have similar hidden senses that influence us without our awareness? Maybe we're picking up on signals, whether from other people, the environment, or something beyond the physical world, that push us in one direction or another. Some believe these unseen influences could be part of a much larger system, almost like a computer program. In the context of simulation theory, our choices might not be completely free. Instead, we could be following paths set by coded variables, nudged towards certain outcomes to keep the program running smoothly. If that's true, what we think of as a spontaneous decision could actually be a subtle correction from the system. Then there's the spiritual interpretation, the idea that a guardian force, spirit guide, or higher self might be protecting or directing you. Many people have stories about feeling guided during a critical moment. They can't see or hear anything physically, but they experience a strong inner push or pull that saves them from harm or leads them to a life-changing opportunity. Skeptics may dismiss this as coincidence, but to the person experiencing it, the sense of being guided feels real, sometimes overwhelmingly so. Even in everyday life, we might notice these forces at work. You think of an old friend and feel the urge to reach out, only to find they needed someone to talk to at that exact moment. You suddenly feel uncomfortable in a place you normally enjoy, and later learn something unsettling happened there. You pick a book off a shelf at random, and it contains the exact advice you needed. It's possible that multiple unseen forces work together, our subconscious mind processing information, our senses detecting things beyond our conscious awareness, and maybe even something external feeding us gentle nudges. Whether those nudges come from nature, a shared consciousness, or an advanced simulation, the effect is the same. Our lives can be shaped by decisions we don't fully understand. Perhaps the real question isn't whether these unseen forces exist, but whether we can learn to notice them. That gut feeling, that sudden change of mind, that quiet voice telling you this way, not that way, it could be worth listening to. Even if we never uncover the exact source, acknowledging these moments might help us navigate life with more trust in the mysterious patterns guiding us. Because maybe, just maybe, the choices we think we're making alone are part of a much bigger design, one that operates quietly, invisibly, and yet shapes our lives in ways we can't begin to measure. Unexplained knowledge. You somehow have you ever known something without any idea how you came to know it? Maybe you answered a trivia question perfectly despite never studying the topic. Or perhaps you suddenly understood how to fix something you'd never worked on before. This strange phenomenon, where knowledge appears in your mind without explanation, has puzzled people for centuries. It's often described as a kind of download from somewhere else, leaving you wondering if your mind is pulling information from hidden memories, a shared consciousness, or even a programmed source in a simulated reality. One of the most famous examples of unexplained knowledge comes from people who suddenly speak a foreign language they've never studied. There are documented cases of individuals waking from comas or intense dreams and speaking fluently in languages they had no prior exposure to. While skeptics argue these people might have had some background knowledge or overheard phrases in the past, the fluency level in some cases is difficult to dismiss as mere coincidence. It's as if the brain had access to a hidden language file all along. Another example appears in certain survival situations. People have reported suddenly knowing exactly what to do in life-threatening moments, performing medical procedures, navigating complex terrains, or operating machinery they had never used before. This kind of instant competence raises questions about whether human brains hold more information than we consciously realize, possibly inherited through genetics, absorbed unconsciously, or even unlocked in moments of extreme need. Children sometimes display this phenomenon in an even more mysterious way. A child might casually mention details about historical events, distant places, or specialized topics far beyond their years. While some attribute this to an overactive imagination or accidental exposure to information, the precision in certain cases suggests something deeper. This is especially true in situations where the child describes events they couldn't possibly have known, sometimes aligning eerily with documented history. Psychologists often explain unexplained knowledge through the concept of implicit memory. Our brains can store vast amounts of information we don't actively recall, and certain triggers might bring that hidden knowledge into consciousness. For example, you might have absorbed complex information from overhearing conversations, glimpsing text, or subconsciously processing media. Later, this knowledge might surface, giving the impression of sudden insight. But there's also a more mysterious interpretation. Perhaps our minds are connected to something larger than ourselves. Some scientists and philosophers have explored the idea of a collective unconscious, a shared mental space that contains the experiences and knowledge of humanity. If such a network exists, maybe moments of unexplained knowledge are just times when we briefly tap into that shared data. In the context of simulation theory, unexplained knowledge might be the result of programmed updates. Imagine a video game where the player suddenly gains new abilities or information when the storyline demands it. If reality operates on similar principles, our minds might receive hidden code injections of information when needed, allowing us to solve problems or understand concepts instantly. Even in everyday life, small moments of unexplained knowing can feel uncanny. Maybe you've been in a new city and navigated it as if you'd been there before, or you've guessed the answer to a complex question with complete confidence and been right. These moments stick with us because they challenge our usual understanding of how learning works. Of course, not all instances are mystical. Sometimes our brains simply make connections faster than we realize. We might underestimate how much information we've picked up over time and how quickly our subconscious can piece it together. Yet the most puzzling cases, the ones that seem to defy chance and logic, leave room for the possibility that something stranger is going on. Whether it's hidden memory, inherited knowledge, a shared human database, or a clue that our reality is programmed, unexplained knowledge invites us to question how our minds really work. Are we simply storing more than we realize? Or are we occasionally accessing information from beyond ourselves? Whatever the answer, the next time you know something without knowing how, it might be worth asking, where did that come from? And why now? Reality acting differently in extreme conditions. Most of the time, the world around us behaves in predictable ways. Drop an object and it falls, heat something and it expands. These rules are so reliable that we barely think about them. But in extreme conditions, whether it's the vast emptiness of space, the crushing depths of the ocean, or the intense cold near absolute zero, reality can begin to behave in ways that seem strange, even impossible. One of the most dramatic examples comes from outer space. Near a black hole, the rules of time and space begin to twist. Gravity becomes so strong that it bends light itself and slows time for anything close to it. To an observer far away, someone near the black hole would appear to move in slow motion, their seconds stretching into hours or even years. This effect, known as time dilation, isn't science fiction. It's a proven prediction of Einstein's theory of relativity. Reality in this case becomes flexible, with time behaving differently depending on where you are. On the opposite end of the spectrum, reality also shifts in the subatomic world. At the quantum level, particles don't act like tiny balls following simple paths. Instead, they can exist in multiple places at once, change behavior when observed, and even seem to communicate instantly over vast distances. These strange effects don't show up in our daily lives because they usually happen on unimaginably small scales. But they remind us that our familiar version of reality is only a small slice of what's possible. Extreme cold is another environment where reality seems to rewrite its rules. When substances are cooled to temperatures close to absolute zero, the lowest temperature theoretically possible, atoms almost stop moving. At this point, materials can behave in bizarre ways. For example, liquid helium can become a superfluid, flowing without any friction at all. It can climb walls, leak through solid containers, and swirl forever without slowing down. These behaviors don't fit with our everyday understanding of liquids, yet they happen reliably in these extreme conditions. The deep ocean is another place where the world changes in surprising ways. At extreme pressures, water itself can behave differently, forming strange types of ice that are denser than normal and can exist even at high temperatures. Creatures living in these conditions often defy expectations too. Some survive in complete darkness, without sunlight, by feeding on chemicals from hydrothermal vents. These environments show that life and matter can adapt to realities very different from the ones we're used to. Even on Earth's surface, extreme conditions can make reality behave oddly. In deserts, the intense heat can bend light to create mirages, making distant objects appear to be shimmering pools of water. In the polar regions, extreme cold and unique atmospheric conditions can make the sun appear in multiple places at once, a phenomenon called a sundog. These optical tricks are reminders that what we see is not always the full truth. Conditions can alter our perception just as much as they alter the physical world. Scientists have also found that at extremely high speeds, reality changes in measurable ways. According to relativity, the faster you move, the slower time passes for you compared to someone who's stationary. Astronauts on the International Space Station experience this effect on a tiny scale. After months in orbit, they return to Earth just a fraction of a second younger than they would have been if they'd stayed here. It's a small difference, but it proves that speed itself can alter the flow of time. All these examples suggest that the rules of reality aren't as fixed as they might seem. Instead, they can bend, twist, or completely transform depending on the environment. Extreme heat, cold pressure, gravity, or speed can all create conditions where the normal laws of physics act in unexpected ways. It's tempting to think of these extreme situations as distant and irrelevant to our daily lives, but they hint at something profound, that the universe is far stranger and more flexible than it appears in our comfortable, everyday conditions. If reality can behave so differently under pressure, in deep space or at the quantum level, it's worth wondering how much of what we think is normal is just a product of where and how we live. In the end, extreme conditions are like stress tests for the universe. They reveal the hidden possibilities and strange behaviors that are always there, waiting for the right circumstances to emerge. And each time scientists uncover one of these oddities, we're reminded that reality is not a rigid set of rules, it's a living, shifting thing capable of far more than we might imagine. Gut feelings that turn out to be correct. Have you ever had a moment where you just knew something before it happened, without any logical reason why? Maybe you suddenly felt the urge to call a friend only to find out they were going through something difficult. Or you took a different route home for no real reason, and later learned you avoided a huge traffic accident. These moments can feel strange, like some invisible part of you is tuned into information that your conscious mind hasn't processed yet. We often call it a gut feeling or an intuition, but the mystery is why it's sometimes so accurate. From a scientific point of view, intuition is often explained as the brain recognizing subtle patterns. Your senses might pick up on tiny details, like a shift in someone's tone, a glance, or even environmental cues, and your subconscious processes them faster than you can consciously think. The result is a sudden feeling without clear evidence. This idea suggests that gut feelings are less mystical and more like hidden data analysis happening in the background of your mind, but there are times when this explanation doesn't seem to cover it. Some gut feelings feel too precise, predicting events or outcomes that no amount of subconscious pattern recognition should logically explain. For example, there are documented cases of people feeling an overwhelming urge to leave a building minutes before an accident occurs, or sensing danger while miles away from a loved one who is in trouble. These cases push intuition into the territory of the unexplained. One possible explanation is that our brains might be more connected to our environment than we realize. Some researchers believe humans could have evolved subtle survival instincts similar to those found in animals, like birds sensing earthquakes before they strike, or deer freezing just before a predator appears. These instincts might operate beneath our awareness, sending signals that feel like sudden certainty. Others suggest that gut feelings could involve something even stranger, perhaps hints of a collective consciousness or a connection between minds. This idea has been explored in various philosophical and spiritual traditions, where intuition is seen as a way of tapping into a shared field of information that all living things contribute to. If such a network exists, it could explain why gut feelings sometimes seem to reach beyond what's logically possible. There's also the psychological angle. Gut feelings can sometimes be the result of deep personal experience. If you've gone through certain events before, your brain stores countless details, even ones you didn't consciously notice. Later, when a similar situation arises, your mind might fire off a warning signal before you're aware of why. It's not magic, it's memory working faster than conscious reasoning. Of course, gut feelings aren't always correct. Sometimes what we think is intuition is actually bias, fear, or wishful thinking. That's why people often struggle with knowing when to trust their instincts. A good rule of thumb is to weigh your gut feelings against the facts you do have. If they align, it's worth paying attention. If they don't, it might still be wise to listen, but with caution. The most fascinating part of gut feelings is how they can make us feel deeply connected to something larger than ourselves. They suggest that our minds are not isolated machines, but are in constant dialogue with our surroundings, whether that's through physical senses, subconscious processing, or something more mysterious. In the end, gut feelings remind us that human perception is far from fully understood. We might think we know how our minds work, but moments when intuition proves eerily accurate suggest there's still much to uncover. Whether it's a survival mechanism, a deep memory recall, or a hint of something beyond the physical world, our gut feelings may be proof that we are constantly receiving far more information than we realize, if only we're willing to trust it. The possibility that you've dreamed this all before. Have you ever experienced a moment that feels so strangely familiar, you're certain you've seen it before, in a dream? Maybe you're standing in a place you've never visited, talking to someone you've only just met, yet every detail feels eerily known. This isn't just the fleeting déjà vu many people talk about. It's the unsettling sense that you actually dreamed this exact situation, days, weeks, or even years before it happened. Some people brush off these moments as coincidences. Others see them as evidence that dreams can be more than just random images created by the brain at night. The possibility that you've dreamed something before it happened raises deep questions about time, memory, and the nature of reality itself. From a scientific perspective, one possible explanation is that our brains are incredible pattern-making machines. In dreams, we often combine bits of real experiences, emotions, and predictions into new scenarios. Later, when something similar happens in real life, it might feel like you predicted it, when in fact, you just created a scene in your dream that was close enough to reality to trigger that sense of recognition. However, there are cases that make this explanation feel incomplete. Some people report dreaming highly specific details like exact conversations, unusual objects, or rare events that later occur exactly as they saw them. This precision makes the coincidence explanation harder to accept. One theory is that dreams could be tapping into a deeper layer of consciousness that isn't bound by linear time. In this view, the mind might sometimes access information from the future just as it accesses memories from the past. If time isn't as rigid as we perceive it to be, then perhaps dreams can sometimes glimpse events that haven't happened yet. This idea overlaps with certain spiritual and philosophical beliefs. Many traditions view dreams as a space where the soul or consciousness can move freely, unconstrained by the limits of the physical body. In this space, past, present, and future may all exist at once, allowing the dreamer to visit moments that haven't yet unfolded while in waking life. There's also the possibility that dreams act as a form of preparation. Even if they don't predict events perfectly, they might help the mind rehearse for situations it will eventually face. If your brain creates a scene that later happens in real life, it can feel like prophecy, but it might simply be that your subconscious was running through likely possibilities, and one of them happened to match reality closely. Scientists have also explored whether your dreams could be connected to the phenomenon of precognition, knowing about events before they occur. While mainstream science is cautious about such claims, there have been experiments suggesting that people can sometimes respond to information before it is presented to them. If this is true, dreams might be one way the mind processes those faint signals from the future. Of course, there's a more skeptical explanation: memory errors. Human memory is not perfect, it's flexible and can be altered without us realizing it. When something happens that feels familiar, the brain might retrofit a memory of having dreamed it before, even if that dream never actually happened. This could explain why some dream predictions seem so accurate in hindsight. Whether or not dreams truly predict the future, the feeling of having dreamed something before it happens is powerful. It challenges our sense of time and suggests that reality might be more fluid than we think. It also blurs the line between imagination and reality. If you dreamed it before, does that make the dream part of your life's timeline, just as real as the waking moment? In the end, the possibility that you've dreamed this all before remains a mystery. Maybe it's a trick of memory, maybe it's a hidden function of the mind, or maybe, just maybe, it's proof that the boundaries we place around time and reality are far more flexible than we've been taught. Whatever the truth is, the experience leaves one lingering thought. If we have dreamed moments before they happen, what else might be waiting for us in the uncharted space of our sleeping minds?